Hegemony, noun, hegemony, preponderant influence or authority over others, domination, Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Human beings are some of the most intelligent, forward-thinking creatures on this planet. Using our intelligence, we have begun to transcend nature, in the sense that we are not bogged down by the same struggles that our ancestors were. Instead of struggling against the weather, we have created buildings and vehicles that can withstand tornadoes, hurricanes, and earthquakes. Instead of worrying about apex predators, such as big cats, we've developed weapons and technology where even a child could stop a hyperpredator dead, simply by pulling a trigger or pushing a button. If we want to grow more food, then all we have to do is edit a crop's gene to produce more. If we want drinking water, many of today's societies can find clean water readily flowing from a faucet in their home. By creating massive systems of technology, we humans have allowed ourselves to transcend many of nature's survival struggles that our species has toiled with since the dawn of time. This transcendence has been an explosive and recent one, as the past 100 years have amounted to exponentially more technological advances than all previous eons of humanity combined. Since, for the majority, our lives are not fraught with the struggles of basic survival in the natural world, many of us enjoy leisure time and luxuries of choice on many topics that were previously focal points of effort. Topics such as the choice of what to wear, what to eat, what to drink, where to live and how to live have turned into a question of not simply what, but instead what do we want. Instead of simply maintaining life, we are now able to choose the life and path we so desire, and by having much of the basic survival needs met already, this frees our hands and our minds from such worries, which means that we can focus our energy elsewhere. Many of the old survival necessities have been replaced by major systems that fulfill such survival needs. In today's society, many, if not all, of these systems are based on money, a man-made currency with a value that's standardized and respected across the world. While countries use different types of money, the concept stays true and the value of each can be weighed and exchanged against each other. We are able to trade our time and effort for money, then trade money for these survival resources. Thus, the need for survival is met without having to think twice. Many of these survival necessities are not cripplingly expensive, and therefore a vast majority of the populations in established communities are able to have sufficient funds left over after paying for them. We use this surplus money to build our lives and have the ability to pay for novelty and extracurricular items and experiences. With the ability to pay for novelty and extracurricular luxuries, humans have reached a point where society has transcended nature. We do not worry our minds with basic survival, so therefore we do not need to worry about survival in the natural world. I call this human centricism. Human centricism is a belief or paradigm that consciously and subconsciously pervades many humans on this planet. Since so many do not have to worry about the struggles of the natural world, many go their whole life without even considering it. Countless humans are worried about their business and the cost of goods on their pockets. They are not, however, worried about their business's impact on the surrounding nature or its taxes on the earth. Many humans worry about luxury and status, and are willing to pay money for this no matter what the tax on the natural world may be. This leads to many things, such as poachers hunting animals to extinction, farmers destroying entire forests to create land to farm upon, and fisheries culling the waters they fish within to maximize their profits per effort. If there are people willing to look past the cost on the planet and pay for these goods, no matter how detrimental, there is likely somebody who's willing to make $1 and follow through with the necessary act to provide such products. Though as humans we can find ourselves subconsciously lost in the human realm, this is not the only realm we live within. There is a much larger system of life on Earth that we are a part of, which will continue on with or without us, yet we cannot continue on without it. This greater system carries with it its own laws, natural laws. These are laws that maintain the status quo of all we know. We're talking about laws of physics, mathematics, and science. These laws that maintain the status quo will strive to achieve the status quo automatically, inside and outside of human pertinence. If a certain heat is applied to water, it will begin to boil. If you fall and scrape your knee, you will feel pain and begin to bleed, as long as your body is operating optimally. If you cut down trees, the Earth's lungs, the Earth will lose its ability to clean air as efficiently. The universal laws have forces which automatically act upon the matter in the universe to ensure that they adapt to the changing conditions, thus keeping everything within the status quo. Whether we like it or not, we are subject to these forces, as are our actions. These forces, which strive to maintain balance in the status quo, will be referred to as balancing forces. I'd like to briefly touch on an eon-old device that will help illustrate and explain some of the phenomena discussed in this book. A symbol that can be used to illustrate the ever-balancing nature of the universe is the Taoist symbol of the yin and yang. Though not meant to fully describe the phenomena present, I wish to quickly go over what this symbol means to better illustrate some concepts that will be presented in the following chapters. Depicting two opposing halves constantly moving in a state of flux, the yin and yang does a wonderful job of illustrating the push-pull, give-take nature of the universe. Despite artistic renditions which show a 50-50 ratio, along with common belief, the yin and yang are not an equal 50-50 ratio, therefore it is not fully balanced. Instead, the yin and yang are composed of unequal, ever-changing, ever-moving proportions. Sometimes there is more yin than yang, and vice versa, causing the symbol to be a majority of one over the other at all times. These unequal proportions are constantly flowing against each other, pushing and pulling in a state of flux, influenced by each other's movements. This illustration perfectly encapsulates the concept that nothing is ever stagnant, nor is anything ever entirely one pole or the other. All phenomena are composed of both. Sometimes individuals are too close to see the greater picture, blinding them from seeing the other side. But when zooming out, one can see the glimmers of the opposing side in the ripples of actions. In other words, sometimes from the perspective of yin, one may not be able to see the yang of the situation. However, this does not mean that the yang is not present and actively moving in response to the yin's action. This can be exaggerated with time. From wildfires come new life. From a single individual's experience, many things can seem entirely and ultimately yin or yang. But that does not mean that such a thing is only one or the other. The true nature of the universe, and thus that of every human being, is creative, productive, progressive, orderly and harmonious. Aberrant thinking and behavior, that is, thinking and behavior which deviate from the natural universal moral order of harmony, balance and productivity, will absolutely evoke a negative response from the corresponding universal energies, as surely as a shadow follows its form. Huaching Ni. At an animal sanctuary I once volunteered at, there were two ant holes running parallel to the gate of the main pasture. This resulted in a line of ants constantly walking across the path of anybody entering the main pasture, ultimately resulting in the destruction of the ants beneath the feet of those entering, especially as we wheeled wagons and drove utility vehicles through the gate. Underfoot, the ants would be destroyed as a result of our actions. Whether or not we knew the ants to be there, they would be destroyed. Whether or not we cared about the ants being there, they would be destroyed. I'm not calling upon any morality here or anything of the sort. I'm merely pointing towards the phenomena that the ants would be destroyed unconsciously by anyone's time at the sanctuary. Throughout this book, I will refer to the term underfoot to describe the position of one being beneath the metaphorical feet which we step. Whether or not we mean to, and whether or not the creatures can comprehend what's going on, does not matter. Our actions have reactions, which are sometimes experienced somewhere in this universe. Underfoot is purely metaphorical. It does not mean physically under a foot. Instead, it means receiving the consequence of an action that one passes on to another. Underfoot might mean the fish who suffocates on a plastic bag that was thrown into a stream. The fish perishes as a result of our action and at no fault of their own. Therefore, the fish is underfoot, our foot. The term humanity can be defined simply as the human race. The human race falls under the kingdom of Animalia. However, aside from the obvious physical differences that stand us apart from our closest relatives, primates, and therefore all other animals, there is something else that causes the impacts of our actions on our surroundings to reflect in a starkly different manner than the rest of things in the natural world. That is why we can even use the term natural world, as it alludes to an unnatural world, the unnatural world being the human world. Humanity becomes something that makes us so unique that it deserves its own word. Separate from the natural world, humanity is what makes us stand out from our animal cousins, who we share both similar DNA and physical bodies with. While not true for every animal for the most part, we see very similar body components in animals that remind us that we ultimately come from the same tree as our animal cousins, such as eyes, heads, and even invertebrates from bugs to crabs have arms and legs. So, what makes us so different? Could opposable thumbs really be the defining characteristic that causes us to stand so far above the rest of the kingdom of Animalia? Is it our ability to use tools or problem solve? Surely not, as many animals from primates to frogs have opposable thumbs, while the likes of birds and fish use tools and also problem solve. Therefore, the answer to what makes us different is the structure of our brain. Our human brains have evolved to be exactly what we need them to be, giving us the intelligence, sentience, and cognitive skills responsible for allowing us to do what we do. Our brains have a different physical structure, different than all other animals. It is effectively the perfect brain shape that creates and allows our exact capacities. One can think of humanity as almost like a special gene. The gene which is responsible for our brain's shape becomes the gene that is responsible for humanity. Everything else around us lacks it. There is clearly something in us humans that's different to everything else on this planet and separates us mentally and physically from every other living creature. Look around at everything that humanity has created. All things created by man is proof of this. For the most part, the only things on this planet that don't hold life are man-made. Life sprouts next to the hottest, most toxic vents in the ocean, yet nothing survives the sterile floors of a hospital after they've been cleaned. The capacities that have allowed us to sterilize and clean said floor is a testament to our humanity, which allows us to stand out from and function above all else on this planet. Years ago, humans competed with nature and natural elements, viewing the natural world as an equal. But as time has progressed, human culture and generational LTP, or long-term potentiation, evolved and grew. Us humans then began to transcend nature, stepping away from and moving above the natural world that we used to be in direct competition with. This eventually allowed us to do things as unnatural as creating germicides and pesticides, observe and even change weather patterns, clone living creatures, and a plethora of things unseen in the natural world before humans reached this point. Since humans have reached this point, the point of transcendence of many of the natural world's struggles, we stand above and outside of such a space. Our societies hardly worry about the dangers of the night's cold, as we have shelter and warmth to allow us to sleep comfortably. Our societies hardly worry about not having enough food to eat. In fact, the struggle has become more about what food we want to eat, as we have far more options at our fingertips than we could ever consume in one meal. Where in some places to this day clean drinking water is still a scarce resource for survival, in many of our established societies it can readily be found, flowing from multiple faucets and structures within our homes at any time we desire. Sometimes near endlessly we can leave the water running all day, every day, and it will not run out. Surely our societies do worry about these problems, but have already spent so much time setting up systems to solve them that once set up, these systems only need to be maintained by a handful of people, whilst the basic survival need is fulfilled for the greater mass of population. Since we no longer worry ourselves with the basic fundamentals of survival, for example, hunting for tonight's dinner this afternoon, it frees our time and hands to pursue other things, such as material pursuits and spiritual or recreational pursuits. While in a time that the natural world continues to struggle with its age-old survival, humanity has allowed us to a position where many of us can sit on the couch under a cozy blanket, watching TV with a microwave dinner and a soda. This stark contrast, as well as the utilization of our freed time and mental energy, allows us to focus above and past the natural world and basic survival. When talking about practices that only operate to serve the human realm, human-centric practices, such as some for-profit business systems, Resources are inherently taken from their sources. Whether mining, foresting, or farming, all involve the action of taking a resource from its source. On the topic of taking, there is one extremely notable fact to be kept in mind. Many selfish actions involve taking, which is the polar opposite of giving. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, to take means to catch or attack through the effect of a sudden force or influence. In other words, to take means someone must have possessed something to be taken. One cannot steal from someone who has nothing. One cannot steal if there is nothing to be stolen. This means that, in order to exist, the energy of taking must take from something outside of itself. It is manufactured and does not exist past its own fruition. If there is nothing to take, the energy will be powerless and will not exist. Systems built on taking inevitably crumble. The energy of take is embodied by an example like fire, destroying one's source of nutrition in an effort to simply persist. Temporary in nature, this energy will damage its source of fuel until the fuel ceases, which will result in the taker ceasing. Once the fuel is not present, the taking force will cease to exist, unable to continue on its own fruition. Take-reliant forces fatigue and diminish quickly when their fuel is not present. Think of fire, which only exists when it has something to convert into itself. With no fuel, there is no fire. Therefore, take-reliant forces must remain properly fueled to maintain their power, and must also increase their consumption to increase their output or power. This creates a snowball effect of increasing consumption in order to increase power. It appears that the energy of giving and taking have the same physical value, thus making each exchange appear to be balanced. However, there are actually stark, important differences in the two poles. Let's say a person with $0 earns $50, which later gets stolen from them. Let's take a look at this exchange. A person gives energy, physical, like time and effort, and metaphysical, like thought and intention, to create $50. A thief then takes that $50. While they may hold the same monetary value, there is a difference in the possession of that same $50. The difference in this exchange is in the energy that goes into each side of it. The original owner of the $50 exchanged physical energy and effort to earn and create the $50 for themselves. The thief simply took the funds from the original holder, taking something that was already there, as opposed to creating something that was not there, as the creator did. It did not require effort or creation for the thief to take the $50, and though it may have taken effort in creating a plan to obtain it, the thief actually made no effort to create the $50, as it had already been created. Through creative energy and effort, the infinite potentiality of the universe is taken and converted into money by the creator. From $0, the creator creates $50. What will the creator then continue to do with this? Turn it into $100? Save the money in a bank? Donate it to charity? When stolen, this infinite pure potentiality created item is reduced to a finite limited energy, $50. When the thief takes the $50, they're taking it at its value, not at its potential. It is worth exactly $50 flat. Sure, the thief might have plans to turn the $50 into $100, or to save the money or donate it to charity, but not before the act of taking the created $50 directly out of the hands of the person who brought it into this universe. The intention and drive behind the creation is severed, meaning the creator ceases to create with such energy source, thus ceasing the growth of both the creator and creation. The effort to create the $50 was made by the rightful owner, yet the reward is reaped by the thief. Had the effort not been put in by the creator, the thief would have nothing to reap. The thief is reliant on the energy of the creator, while the creator is self-sufficient. Similar to fire, which consumes until it dies, if fire does not have fuel, it will not exist. Similar to fire, actions with the energy of take destroy their sources of nutrition. You cannot steal from someone without their possessions going missing. Great things have come from fire, but the raw element of it is destructive and demanding of fuel to exist. It is not a permanent solution, though it can be used as a tool to create other things. When you steal, you gain possession of something, while the victim loses possession. You cannot take something from someone who has nothing, which means when taking, you will always be taking something from someone. The value of life. Value, the regard that something is held to deserve. What is the value of life? What regard does a life deserve? Are lives deserving of any consideration at all? The value of life is not something that one values about another. That would more closely resemble love. The value of life is only felt and understood by the sole possessor of such life, the individual experiencing it. Life matters only to the beholder, and to the beholder this is the most valuable thing of all. Thus there is no actual external value for life. Generally, in business systems involving live resources like animals, the value of life is completely lost and overshadowed by the desire of humans to utilize the being as a resource rather than respecting the being as the experiencing individual that it is. Those who lose sight of the value of life or are unaware of it can become dangerous towards the individual whose life is in question. Those who do not regard the value of life can become exponentially more dangerous when they also value monetary pursuits and choose to disregard the value of another's life in order to further their personal, human-centric monetary gains. Humans quickly and easily lose touch with the value of life because they frequently value their own pursuits more than the desires of others, even desires as critical and sacred as the desire not to suffer. This level of disregard generally occurs at a subconscious level, but even when consciously acknowledged by the individual, there is frequently so much cognitive dissonance, conflict between belief and actual action, between the individual and the reality of their actions, that they can look the truth in the face and still not feel any weight from these actions. The price of animals is cheap, very cheap, sometimes for pennies or fractions of a penny per living creature. It's even less for creatures who are already dead, who must be bred, then killed. This demonstrates that many humans do not value animate experiencing life. For animated life means so little, less than the smallest amount of human-centric currency possible. Because of this, one can see that the humans selling such creatures do not care that it is alive, only that it's an asset, thus a business expense. These sellers only care that the animal is alive for the purpose of needing it alive. Many industries profit off of dead animals, which require animals being bred and killed, further exemplifying the disregard humans generally hold for the value of life, which, again, only matters to the small individuals that fall underfoot of a human's business model. Within the animal trade pervades a mentality which depersonalizes the beings that are used as resources. These businesses treat the lives of those underfoot as if they are of no value, care, or concern, and thus these beings are treated ultimately as if they are no more than an inanimate object, although they are a universe in themselves, a living experience as you or I are. This is in part because, in practice, the beings are literally viewed as an inanimate object instead of a living individual. Generally, a business owner views these beings through the lens of an asset, an inventory quantity, a cost-loss investment. The business owner is subconsciously disregarding the experience of such beings. These animals are not disregarded because they lack any specific capacities. All animals, from fish who cannot wince their eyes at pain, to animals who show blatant signs of pain congruent with how we do, are used soullessly in business systems. These animals are not disregarded because they are less intelligent than us, as some are even used for their intelligence alone, such as rats, monkeys and dogs bred by suppliers for psychological studies. They are not disregarded because they overpopulate the planet and therefore control of their population is necessary. They are disregarded because we, as humans, view ourselves and our pursuits to be greater than the interests of those underfoot. All the while, the business depersonalizes them, viewing them as nothing more than a number in their inventory, an asset, a business supply. The lack of experience or personalizing comes by the hand of the business and the business only. The business operates as if the individuals are soulless, regardless of whether they are truly soulless or not. These business systems hold no room for the value of life, and therefore will reduce the individual's liberties in an effort to maximize profits and reduce margins. This can and will lead to inhumane treatment and the gradual degradation of treatments done for the welfare of the individuals that are being used in the business system. Life for life versus life for profit. Many practices frequented by humans are knowingly detrimental to animals but are outweighed by our desires for luxuries and material goods. When done for survival, there is little wrong with these actions. However, when done for personal or human material, non-essential gain, then we begin to dwell towards destructive energy. An example of this is that we hunt the largest animals possible. During hunting, it is common to do this as the biggest kill means they yield more haul. They are worth more. When hunting for survival, this is a positive thing, yielding more food and resources for those surviving off the killing of the creature. When hunting for sport, unnecessarily and/or in the name of evil, profit, selfish means outside of necessity, the positive energy of life for survival is replaced by the negative energy of life for profit. Profit in this sense is any personal gain outside of necessary survival. This includes many facets of luxury, prestige, and preference. The targeting and killing of the largest animals is a natural facet of hunting. This practice does not stem from evil or misguided intentions. Coming as a practice of survival, we want the most resources for ourselves and our tribe. This is a perpetuation of life because we desire the largest prey in order to gather the most resources for our people. Greater consideration isn't needed as the act was necessary and well intended. While not wrong for survival when hunting for sport, such practices can be extremely damaging to the ecosystems, and the victims can span further than the individual who perished at the hand of the hunter. This should be taken into consideration as the killing is for profit, not survival, and is ultimately unnecessary. One example of the unseen ripples of such practices is that many times the largest animals are elders of the communities they belong to. Elder elephants may hold the wisdom of a watering hole, visited many years ago, that is a herd's only chance of survival during a drought. So in that case, a large elephant that is shot for sport might result in an entire herd perishing during a drought 2 years later. While it is true that an elephant shot for survival might yield the same result, the necessity for human survival alleviates us of guilt, as it was something we must do. Circling back to the main point, elder tuna hold the wisdom of past feeding routes that may help their school during a time of need. The greater point I'm making with these examples is that there are more victims at the hand of the hunter than they initially anticipate, and some of our practices show a perpetual disregard for the experience of any others outside of our immediate selves. The difference between life for survival, ironically life for life exchanging their life for our life, and life for profit, their life for our non-essential gain, is ultimately where the energy goes. Life for life is a perpetuation of life, a perpetuation of the creative generating force that creates and animates the world around us. Life for profit exchanges that same animatory energy of the creator for the soulless energy of currency. Life for profit exchanges do convert life energy into a different form of energy, currency. But this newfound energy is a finite one that holds no real value in any means outside of human pertinence. Because of this, such an energy exchange is extremely human-centric and can very easily become detrimental to the greater interests of all life on this planet. It is trading a universal infinite source for a man-made finite source, which leads to a dead end, a stint, which means such trades are ultimately a destructive action. Another way to think about it is like so, situations of life or death are life and death matters. Making a choice that is necessary for survival, with the only two options being to act or to perish. There are no questions to be called upon such actions. Actions meant to perpetuate life are necessary and sometimes bear the hand of evil and malice, even though they are committed out of love and are ultimately positive. However, when the decision is a life or life matter, meaning that the situation is non-critical and survival will remain undisturbed regardless of which choice is made, introducing or choosing the option of death crosses a line. If survival will remain undisturbed and we go out of our way to take life from another for superficial material or monetary gains, then such an exchange destroys genuine energy and replaces it with a temporary artificial reward that is exponentially less charged than its living counterpart. Through the ever-pervading balancing forces, the universe will strive to bring balance back to this exchange. To highlight this differentiation, let's take an example of two cattle farmers. The first cattle farmer owns a small farm where they raise cattle for milk and beef. It's a humble living. This farmer spends their days maintaining the farm, raising the cows and selling the meat at the local farmers' market. The cows are happy, for the most part, being as the farmer knows that a healthy and happy cow will lead to a better product. The farmer gives them large pastures and clean food. This farmer is not rich and uses the money he makes to feed his family, put a little in savings, and uses the surplus to maintain and update the farm by buying new supplies and even toys for the cows. The farmer is approached by a corporation that wishes to establish a large contract with the farm. The contract will bring much monetary gain to the farmer, though to meet such demand, he would have to push himself and his farm to the maximum capacity. As a result, this would sacrifice his leisure time and the farmland's integrity. Knowing this, the farmer denies the contract, despite the monetary gains it would bring, as he knows that the greater implications of such actions would be exhausting on himself, the land, and also the cows which he makes a living from. The second farmer is in a very similar position. He too owns a small farm where he raises cattle for milk and beef. This farmer also spends his days maintaining the farm, raising the cows and selling the meat at local farmers' markets. However, he aims to minimize overhead while maximizing profits. This leads to the farmer cramming the pastures to their full capacities while feeding the cows the cheapest food sources possible. He uses hormones and drugs to keep the cows healthy, seeing as a normal cow would typically become unhealthy by the conditions of this farm. Because the cow's food source is cheap, it is a less healthy choice for them, and therefore the meat and milk will be of a lesser quality. This farmer is also approached by a corporation that wishes to establish a large contract with the farm. Though it will cost more time and resources and will pack the farm to nearly overcapacity, the farmer accepts the contract with the corporation as it will make them rich. The farmer begins working non-stop, day in and day out, to meet the new demand for their product. The amount of cows needed to be raised steeply increases, and though the farmer expands the land they use, with the payout from the large contract per capita, there are more cows per area of space than prior. The cows now live in close proximity in an unsanitary environment, which results in them becoming sick. The farmer uses more drugs to battle the sicknesses that the cows experience as a result of their new conditions. Notice how the second farmer, in order to increase their money, reduces the cow's quality of life and increases the amount of drugs given to the cows. This reflects the farmer's centric prioritization, a disregard for the experience of the cows in exchange for monetary gain. The conversation of life for life versus life for profit may bring up a question of poachers who survive off the loot of killing animals like elephants and rhinos because they're hunting for survival. The reality of this is that they are not hunting for survival. They are using hunting, a tool for survival, as a tool to make profit, which they then use for their livelihood. Had they been hunting for actual survival, they would certainly take more from their prey than the tusks, leaving the rest of the carcass untouched. This also applies to the fishermen who catch sharks, to then cut off their fins before throwing them back into the ocean to perish. Along with the fishermen who drag massive nets at the bottom of the ocean, obliterating deep-depth animals during the brutal decompression process of surfacing them. They take their pick of the specific animals they're looking for, then throw back the already destroyed remnants of the rest they pulled up. Those who are acting to survive will value their kills, not select the highest priced reward while discarding the rest. In today's current system, there might be some examples of grey areas, where life for life surfaces in systems of life for profit. For example, factory farm workers trading life for life, working for survival to feed their families, are part of a system that is based in life for profit. The sad truth is that many of these workers are in need of a job and take the position with the intention of trading life for life, acting on a love for both their lives and families by taking such jobs. So the truth to this is that yes, these factory workers are not necessarily inherently evil, given that they are merely a cog in the greater system. However, the system that they are a part of is inherently evil in its motivations and practices, meaning they fall beneath the greater system's umbrella. They might intend to trade life for life, using their time in the job in order to feed their family. However, they are a part of a greater system of life for profit, and this will not go unbalanced by the universe. So, even though they may not be subject to balancing forces that result from the greater system of evil that they perpetuate, they will still experience balancing forces as a result of the actions they commit during their time on the job. The universal balancing forces generally will come to workers in these fields, in the field. The environment of major factory farms is not a pleasant one and is often physically toxic to be within. Negative ramifications from working in such intense places can be things such as depression, substance abuse, PTSD, higher rates of suicide and domestic violence, not to mention the physical ramifications of working in wasteful environments that are frequently toxic for humans to be in, leading to respiratory and health problems in workers. Most importantly here, regardless of the floor workers' impact and karmic give and take, the greater system that they are part of is the topic of discussion. Such abhorrent systems cannot be defended because of those working beneath it who are dependent on its success. There is a difference in the individuals working for the greater system and the system itself. Though both are doing bad things, one is working on a greater picture and will lead to greater ramifications, while the other may be hopeless to the winds of fate and merely be doing the best they can in their environment. This is the same contrast between factory farm workers and the greater system of our animal industries. Ultimately, the intention between acting out of life for life and life for profit is a major influencing factor in our interactions with things and their impact on the world. Are we acting selflessly by perpetuating life, even if that means taking a life? Or are we acting selfishly by taking life to perpetuate our material comforts, which ultimately do not exist outside of their own accord, and are effectively a literal dead end for energy? The greater impact of the situation is based on the intention behind the action, because ultimately, life for life is in accordance with our best interest of perpetuating life. Life for profit, while appearing to be a positive human-centric act of discretion, is actually a one-way street towards death and soullessness. Picture a plastic bottle, made for single use, yet once discarded it lasts for almost forever in the environment of our planet, our finite space. As a species, if we intend to live for as long as possible on this planet, we cannot be bogged down by surface-level luxuries that cause us greater harm in the long run. The short-term impact of actions is one conversation that can be frequented for debate. However, the long-term motivations are where the experience of the individual begins to wane in the light of the experience as a whole. The power of evil. Candy from a baby? Evil is a power source of its own, which relies on the negative energy of destruction, taking what has already been created. Because the resources are already present, rather than having to be created, the power of evil is definite and easy to access. The cost of fire is the fuel itself. With fuel, oxygen plus tinder source, the fire can sustain itself indefinitely, creating lasting and impactful changes to the world through very little effort from itself. As an insatiable power, the fire will eat away everything it can until it runs out of a fuel source. This is the destructive energy of the universe, the negative side of the atom, the death which follows all life. Without fuel, the fire would have no source to sustain itself and would cease to exist. If no fuel was ever present, the fire would never exist. One might say, well, if life has no fuel, then life also ceases to exist, which is true. The same way that fire burns effortlessly, a flower will grow effortlessly. The flower does not attempt to grow upwards, it just simply does. However, the main difference is that the flower will only grow in the right conditions, with the right nurturing from a number of different sources, while the fire will destroy regardless, as long as it's subjected to something it can burn. The flower uses its surroundings to create itself and grow, while fire uses itself to diminish all around it, with no other aim than to expand and thrive. Throughout the course of its lifetime, the flower needs the right conditions of sunlight, water, protection from predators and disease. Such sources are used as building blocks in tandem to create the final result, which is the flower. A healthy, safe, well-watered flower will perish without sunlight. A flower with all the resources it needs can be taken by disease without warning. Fire does not experience any ailments, it simply consumes as great as its source of fuel until it ceases to exist. It does not have health or conditions of being which vary or differ and result in the fire succeeding or failing. The fire will simply succeed until it cannot succeed anymore. While maybe not a perfect one-to-one comparison, it still highlights the difference between the creative powers and the destructive powers of the universe. The creative powers create, while the destructive powers destroy creation. The destructive powers hold no power if there is nothing to be destroyed. Power. The definition of power can be summarized as the ability to do something. Let's say I'm driving in a car and a group of motorcyclists are passing me on my left side. If my intention was to destroy the lives of those next to me and/or cause havoc, with a simple movement of my wrist, I can turn my car into the group of motorcyclists, causing them all to crash, leading to life-altering changes for everybody involved and potentially destroying the victims. This is an example of the ease of the power of evil. The powers of creation, which brought all of such elements into alignment at this exact time, the time and effort it took for each biker to obtain their motorcycles, the time and effort spent building the companionship and social ties of the group of bikers, and the many other factors taken into play which brought them all together at such a moment, all destroyed with a simple turning of my wrist. This is an example of the power of evil, deriving power from what's already been created. The provided example aims to illustrate how the power of evil can use the momentum of creation to cause such a destructive impact with very little effort. Evil can be extremely powerful as it causes lasting impacts through deliberate action, thus successfully creating the desired outcomes for the evildoer. Power, being the ability to do something, is a force many can use for both good and evil, and through good and through evil, meaning sometimes forces of good may have to act through destruction to perpetuate creation. Death is a given facet of life. All that live will die. All that experience pleasure will experience pain. There will be no life without death. This means that even in a peaceful world there will still be killing and pain. We now come back to the conversation of the exchange of life for profit versus life for life. Life for life is a necessity. A hunter whose family is hungry is going to kill their prey out of love for their family, thus nurturing the family and breeding more love into the universe. This is not to say that the experience of the prey was not violent, painful, and life-ending, but the intention behind the hand that killed the prey was not a hand of evil, it was a hand of love. Sometimes there is a necessary evil that needs to be taken to perpetuate the greater good of the universe. The hands that deliver this may hold malice towards the victim, yet with a loving intention for them. A hunter aims its bow at their prey's heart, not only to ensure the kill, but at the same time in an attempt to minimize the suffering of the being whose life is about to be taken. Observe the balance in this. The hunter aims their bow with the full intention of killing the creature on the receiving end, yet takes care to minimize the suffering of the prey. Their hand is filled with malice, with the full intention of taking the prey's life, yet they still have the love in their heart to wish the prey a quick and painless death. This has been seen across cultures throughout human history, especially in regards to hunting and farming. The most humane practices are the ones that respect and value the experiences of the individual whose life is going to be taken as a perpetuation of something greater. The great religions of today's world express sentiments of this, minimizing harm, avoiding the killing of certain types of animals dubbed to be more sacred than others, only taking lives when necessary. All because with killing comes a necessary evil that is widely recognized. This is a display of the necessity of evil in certain circumstances. I don't mean evil as in the intention of evil, I mean evil as in the physical manifestation of negativity. For the prey, at the hand of the hunter who's feeding his family, the hunter is the most evil force in the universe. The hunter acts without regard for the prey's family and life. This is not to say that the hunter has not considered the prey's family and life, only that they have acted without regard for those factors, as they must to feed their family. This is where universal balancing forces come into play, and we have to let go, releasing control to things like karma, having faith in the balancing forces of the universe. Sometimes we have to cause suffering to others or have to commit evil to the life of another. This is why our intention is so important. Intention is what we maintain control of no matter the act we must commit. If we are causing evil out of absolute necessity, we can have faith in the universe that it will balance things out for the better, as we are trading life for life. If we commit evil outside of necessity, we cannot be so sure in the safety of our doings, as we are trading life for profit, and profit leads us human-centrically to an energetic dead end. The definition of the word exploit is to make use of meanly or unfairly for one's own advantage. In other words, to exploit or exploitation is using something for one's own advantage. Many things can be exploited, such as, but not limited to, a circumstance, a rule, one's time, effort, or even body. We are briefly going to touch on the unfair side of this, mentioned in the definition itself. Following the standards of life for life versus life for profit, many actions are taken for different reasons. However, some may fall outside the realm of necessity for the perpetuation of life or the greater good, and may serve only to benefit the doer of such action. These unnecessary actions are not inherently evil as long as they are not bringing evil into the universe. However, when they become taxing on an individual, creating taxes that will lead to changes in the physical universe, like a beehive whose honey is stolen will have to replace the honey, such unnecessary exploits will lead to physical changes in the universe which are balancing forces at play. Again, in that same example of honey being stolen from bees, the physical change that will take place is the bees having to replace such honey, leading the universe down a unique path where such potentiality is the reality, as opposed to a reality where the bees didn't have their honey stolen and therefore do not need to replace it. Though not necessarily an egregious or heinous example, what I am suggesting is that the life for life or life for profit motivations behind somebody having taken the honey will ultimately affect the greater outcome of a positive or negative net yield for the planet. Either way, the honey gets taken, but our intention influences the greater ramifications of such an act. Unnecessary exploitation, in any regard, is taxing one for reasons of novelty rather than necessity, thinking selfishly, not selflessly. Unnecessary exploitation is non-essential, unneeded gain at the expense of another. Unnecessary exploitation is a form of evil. The emphasis of this is on unnecessary, taking because we want to instead of because we need to. Exploitation is not necessarily a bad thing, but when we do it without needing to, it becomes a negative force in the universe. Necessary evil is a part of life. War and conflict, as well as predator and prey hunting, are all things that require malice and merciless violent execution towards the victim. However, they are not necessarily wrong or bad, and do not mean that one possesses hate and no respect for the victim underfoot. They can in fact be positive things, even with the hand of evil. When the reasons for exploiting the victims become unnecessary, meaning our survival remains unperturbed without it, such actions become in the name of evil. This, frequently in both Eastern and Western societies, leads to mass suffering in the name of material items and novelties. In Western societies, one example that can be clearly observed is the debt spirals which keep people's time indebted to institutions, effectively enslaving such individuals until they have paid their ever-increasing debts, as if chasing a ball down an endless hill. Or also the major factory farm systems set in place for animal agriculture, valuing profits over the lives and experiences of those being used for food. In Eastern societies, one example that can be clearly observed is the manufacturing industries that detain and work factory workers excessively hard in grueling conditions, paying literal slave wages in the name of maximizing profits. According to the USDA, 30 to 40% of food is lost or wasted before ever reaching shelves and tables. Once it does finally reach the consumers, there is 31% loss or waste. This equated to $161 billion worth of food being wasted in 2010. So, according to these numbers, we can say that 1/3 of all food is wasted in America. Dairy is the most wasted product. This means that one-third of all effort put forth to create food products is ultimately a vain effort, with much of it being a result of unnecessary exploitation. This means that for every 2 animals killed for food, one is killed to be wasted. In the current system, a system that kills 319 animals per second, about 100 animals are slaughtered each second only to be wasted, thrown away, discarded. A question that may come up after viewing such numbers is, with Americans alone wasting over $100 billion worth of food each year, how does world hunger still exist? It's abundantly clear that we do not have a food problem. Instead, we have an accessibility problem. This is because the system is not built to help humans and allow the human race to thrive. It is built to make certain people with certain interests profits. This is also evident by the fact that many factory farming operations are not actually sustainable on their own and rely on government subsidies and bailouts to stay in business. Humans and money, the manufacturing of evil. One of the greatest causes of war, societal disparities, and injustice on this planet is the human greed for money. Humans seemingly have a volatile relationship with money. Volatile meaning it's extreme and harmful to ourselves and others. As evidenced through our actions, we are willing to go to any lengths in the name of money, killing anything in our path and destroying the planet that we live on in an attempt to create systems that will bring us greater monetary reward. These monetary rewards outweigh any costs, believing such purposes to transcend the need for any form of morality, leading to widespread systems that oppress in their aims to exploit and gain from the oppressed. Here is where the dark side of money comes into play. Unfortunately, for those underfoot, much of this side comes out as physical actions, such as crime, robbery, larceny, burglary, extortion, and so on, for-profit war, for-profit policing, for-profit food systems, and for-profit medicine. Money is a form of currency. Currency is a form of energy. We exchange our other forms of energy, time, effort, resources, for money because our major societies run on such currency. Essentially, money has become a popular medium, a common ground, for different energy sources to be converted into a single tender. There is nothing wrong with money, and there is nothing evil about money. It is simply a finite monetary value. The power of evil comes into play when humans begin to use such currency, such tools, such energy, to gain for themselves, while stepping on others as a means of attaining their goal. By stepping on others, by exploiting, by taking, they are not creating. They are instead destroying. They take the potentiality of creation and end its growth. They convert the infinite potential of creation into a finite value. This newfound value is finite, one which will eventually have an end. The dollar bill matters until the human ceases to hold it. Then the dollar turns worthless, while the flower stays universally valuable no matter what. Money can't buy happiness. Those driven by passion, love, and non-material means operate from an internal power source that is eternal and unending. Hope springs eternal. This is why spiritual leaders often lead lives unneeding of riches. Many obtain riches through their journeys, but for many their missions are not for profit, but rather to spread a message or way of life. Those who operate from a physical or material place desire something greater than they hold within themselves, seeking external items for a finite, ultimately temporary solution for an infinitely permanent problem. This sentiment is echoed in the phrase, "money can't buy happiness." Reality of actions. Due to countless factors, many humans do not grasp the full weight of the actions they commit. Chronically operating from human-centric paradigms, they frequently get lost in the human realm and are subject to widespread subconscious disregard for greater life on Earth on a daily basis. Humans get so caught up in their own material pursuits, in their own worlds, that they stand far away from the consequences of their actions, facing the opposite direction. Many times they simply act and discard with no repercussions. This habituation throughout life can pose a major blind spot to some, where they believe the greater picture does not matter because it is overshadowed by the material now found in their human-centric realm. As a rough example, imagine a human who's rushing home from work and has to pick up some groceries. They want to get home for their favorite sports game, which is why they're rushing. In their rush, they forget their reusable bag in the car. This human then uses a single-use plastic bag instead of running out to their car to retrieve their reusable bag, since they want to avoid being late to see kickoff. Without calling morality or anything into question, I pose this example to highlight the phenomena of humans getting lost in the human realm and therefore unintentionally causing damage to the greater realm of life on Earth. Humans might believe the human realm to be the greatest realm, but this is a short-sighted human-centric belief. Such thinking is further exemplified by the fact that humans have come to be through nature, the fact that we've come from nature or greater life on Earth. Life on Earth is a greater realm than the human realm because not only have humans come from it, but it will continue on with or without us. It might not continue on with humans, but humans cannot continue on without it. Although with technology humans might be able to survive without it temporarily, however, they will eventually always need some natural force on this planet or another to supply the further survival of the species. Humans would not last long with only rocks, gases and liquids if none of these compounds were holding life. Since the human realm is not the greatest realm, though we act like it is, many of our actions are short-sighted in the sense that they are actions made to address the human realm surrounding us rather than the greater realm of life on Earth. Through this short-sightedness, we lose sight that our actions ripple into the surrounding world. The plastic we use will be littered onto nature's shoulders. The burger we order is directly paying for another to be created. The oil we purchase is ultimately coming from a limited source, finite and unsustainable. Whether or not we like it or want to look at it, there are reactions to our actions. We can temporarily delay the forthcoming of these consequences, but we cannot stop them if we operate at a rate that has a foreseeable end point. We must show regard in order to continue the perpetuation of life. For without regard, through blind disregard, we will quickly lose ourselves in our own selfish pursuits, and our actions will likely only consider the short-term problem in front of us without considering the larger-scale issues which result from our solutions. There are two major influences that significantly fuel the fires that are burning the world: disconnection and disregard. Both of these place and hold distance in the minds of people, which lead them to commit actions that are harmful to others without feelings of guilt, shame, or any consequences for their actions. Many that are subject to this distancing would change their actions if the distance was shortened. It is easy to throw plastic in the garbage carelessly, for it to be discarded somewhere out of sight and out of mind. However, it would be different if you had to keep your plastic waste on your property. In that case, how long would you have before plastic waste became a factor in your life? Surely, at the rate many of us consume, you would reach a point of unsustainability within a short amount of time, given that all plastic will accrue and remain. The only thing separating you from your plastic waste is physical distance from the moment it's discarded. Distance is a form of disconnection. Disconnection. The definition of the word disconnect is a lack of or a break in connection. The connection we're discussing here is the public's knowledge of many of the consequences of their actions. Disconnection is an illusion caused by natural and unnatural causes. The primary natural cause of disconnection is the sheer fact that we are physically disconnected from the topics at hand. We are physically disconnected from many of the greater systems which we get our resources from. On top of this, on the topic of unnatural causes, many of the powers behind such systems are aware of the necessity of the public's disconnection and therefore spend time and resources to intervene and perpetuate or strengthen such disconnection. The vast majority of the public has not spent time on commercial fishing trawlers, nor have many of us been inside a major factory farm, nor have we sailed for days through one of the many garbage patches in our oceans, or spent time alongside those who are deforesting the Amazon. And most importantly, we are unable to even see the true realities of these situations because systems are legally protected from having their practices revealed to the public. Again, on top of the physical distance between us and such products, many of the industries surrounding these systems have deliberately put into place distractions and shadows of doubt. to increase the distance it would take for a consumer to make a connection between the product and its source, a connection that the industries would not like them to make. The industries use things such as marketing and suppression of information to ensure that only their preferred image is viewed by the public. These tactics take form as things such as false or misleading advertising and governmental assistance in the suppression of revealing the realities of the practices of such industries. Here is a quick example of subtle disconnection. When consulting a Google search at the time of writing for subjects such as top methane producers and causes of methane gas, you will be quickly met with a pie chart from the EPA. The chart presents the top causes of methane producers in 2020: 32% natural gas and petroleum systems, 27% enteric fermentation, 17% landfills, 9% manure management, 6% coal mining, and 9% other. This might ring the ear of some, but this will not necessarily ring the ear of the majority of people who are unfamiliar with what enteric fermentation is. Do people generally know what enteric fermentation is? I certainly didn't. So what is enteric fermentation, which causes almost 30% of all methane gases damaging this planet? Enteric fermentation is the resulting process of cows digesting food, creating gases, and passing such gases. So, ultimately, the two statistics provided by the EPA, 27% enteric fermentation and 9% manure management, can be simply put down as 36% cow waste. So according to the EPA, hidden in plain sight, 36% of all methane gases are a result of cow agriculture, although cow agriculture is never addressed or expressed directly, but instead is euphemized and attempted to be passed in our blind spot. Because of the massive systems in place and the socio-governmental filtering of information that comes out, many of us, if not most, are disconnected from the reality of the source of the products we consume. We have grown in a society that, from a young age, subjects us to believe that farms all have green grass fields with a single red barn, sitting with the sun smiling happily overhead while cows laugh and relax. Take a walk down the dairy section of any supermarket, notice the bright labels with the aforementioned scene, the Red Barn Farm or something of similar innocence. This, in reality, is so far from the truth that it is closer to a lie than a euphemism. Disconnection speaks to an intentional misleading of consumers, along with the subsequent paradigm of the consumer. A paradigm that doesn't see a relation between the product they purchase and the origins from which said product comes from. Much disconnect, specifically in terms of the animal industries, is a result of the systems of marketing, media, and the suppression of accurate information by the systems in power. Many consumers are not aware of the realities of where their fish or milk comes from because their only source of information is focused on maximizing the profits of such industries, rather than transparently displaying the realities of their practices. If it's not free press, what is it? Due to colourful advertising displaying smiling tuna, giggling cows, and red barns atop of spanning grassy fields, many consumers are presented with a positive image in regards to the source of the products they purchase. These, however, do not represent the reality of the situation and are frequently either blatantly euphemized and exaggerated or simply completely untrue. Because of such advertising and branding approaches, consumers are put into a position where they wouldn't have to think twice about the source. The product shows happiness. They cannot and would not sell a lie, one might believe. But the truth of the matter is that they can sell a lie, and they do. There is a known intentional deceit in such practices. They are making physical efforts to hide certain facets of their practice in order to preserve the system they put in place. There is a disconnect between the images of reality and the images of their marketing, so much so that showing their actions would create a known connection, mending such disconnection in the eyes of the viewer, which may cause them to change their mind on the topic. Hence, why showing such realities is literally a criminal offence. There are legal protections that keep such images as standard in those industries, frequently referred to as ag-gag laws. These laws prohibit the distribution of information specifically detailing the actions of the animal agriculture industry, created as a way to suppress the leaking of behind-the-scenes information from animal facilities. These laws were implemented in order to make it illegal to interfere with the animal industries, including the showing of films or pictures of such facilities without the owner's consent. In 2002, the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC, created the Animal and Ecological Terrorism Act, which created penalties for those who were engaged in animal and ecological terrorism, while also adding such persons to a terrorist registry. By their definition, such terroristic practices range from physically impeding the business practices to, more importantly, documenting the practices of animal facilities without the owner's consent. Now, of course, violence and physical impediment are obviously illegal and should not be condoned, but silencing the documentation of legal activities by legal businesses borders on, if not is, suppression. If they're not doing anything wrong, why hide? They're transparent already, aren't they? It's all legal, is it not? It is. However, maybe the problem is not on a legal front, so one must ask themselves why showing the public the realities of a legal business conducting legal business practices would be considered a terrorist activity. If such footage were to defame the owner or hurt the business, wouldn't that be in response to the public's opinion of the owner's actions? What is so horrific, so unjust, so heinous, that the public would shun and reject at the mere sight of? After all, we're civilized and advanced, so aren't all of our acts morally sound and optimized to minimize necessary suffering? If the public was connected to the source of these products, would displaying such information be harmful and therefore need to be made illegal? No, there would be no whistle to be blown. However, there is much that is kept behind closed doors, and there are laws that keep a lock on these doors, which leads to a lack of understanding of the true nature of such products. This is why there is a disconnect from the product itself. Because of the way it is advertised, presented and contrasted against the actual source of the product, there has to be a suppression of information for consumers to remain in the dark. This means that the image the business would like to show is maintained rather than the true face that hides behind the mask. The innocent do not hide their hands. The innocent do not move in secrecy, attacking those who aim to shed light on their actions. Such a disconnect from reality, especially at a young age, leads our lives down a path of disconnection and disregard. How many young children are subject to barnyard toys, bearing cows that go moo, pigs that go oink, one big red barn and a happy farmer with a straw hat and a pitchfork? Keep in mind, these toys would not be problematic if those circumstances were the reality of today's farms. However, in the majority of farm sources found today, this is absolutely not the case. We are not discussing local meat sources, which do in fact bear a resemblance to the red barn on a hill image, but rather the major factory farms that a majority of our meats come from. If, from the start, we are mistaken in our views of what actually goes on, how can we ever question and understand the weight of our actions? If the reality remains hidden to us, will we ever be able to change our stance on the situation? Such disconnection leads us to believe that nothing is wrong, that no wrong is being committed. And because we internally see no wrong being committed, we disregard the consequences of our actions, believing them not to exist. Depersonalization. Depersonalization, the act of minimizing another's experience, sometimes to the point of disbelief in its existence. Depersonalization is one trap that the mind has frequently fallen into, and is one very close to de-individualization. De-individualization being when one minimizes and loses regard for the individuals within large quantities. One example of de-individualization is the quote, "The death of one is a tragedy, the death of millions is a statistic." Depersonalization takes this same de-individualizing thought process of disregarding the individual, and is the additional thought pattern of minimizing and ignoring the experience of each said individual. This frequently leads to an observer having a blind spot to the individual's actions and experiences, where the observer can look directly at the individual acting, yet not see the clearly observable and relatable emotions and thought patterns of said individual. Many animals are experiencing individuals who act to socialize, avoid conflict, avoid suffering, protect interests, and court mates to reproduce. They perform these actions in plain sight, in ways which are frequently similar to our own methods of approaching such situations. Animals actively communicate amongst their own kind and even across species. Some communications we frequently hear, such as birds singing to communicate with each other. Cats purring are expressing an emotion. Fish shake and click to communicate. Dogs bark and use body language which we actively understand as well. However, some may observe such actions, acknowledge it as an expression of emotion, and yet still maintain that animals do not possess the capacity for those very emotions. People can see a cow jumping for joy, say that's a happy cow, and yet internally not believe that cows can feel the emotion of happiness. Hidden in plain sight, such actions show but do not convey to those who will not see. Humans frequently depersonalize animals for many reasons, the overarching one being that they are unable or unwilling to comprehend the possession of a life experience similar to ours within a being that is different from us. Many other times, the act of depersonalizing is because the human has interests in disregarding the individual. There is not necessarily anything wrong with this, like in cases of hunting for survival. However, when the depersonalizing of individuals is in order to make and contribute to profits for a business system, we begin to dwell in the finite energy of evil. Depersonalization acts to numb and blind us to the realities of the world around us. Many see the beings around us acting in ways which we can understand and relate to, yet do not comprehend that the creature is experiencing something similar to what we would experience in such a situation. If the exact same consciousness we possess now was put into the body of an ant, we would scurry in the exact same way as the ant which we step near on the sidewalk. The fact that the ant is scurrying and reacting to such stimulus is evidence of a capacity similar to our own. If something is reacting out of fear, it is cognizant enough to understand what a threat is and that it has to get away. Through disregard, disconnection, and depersonalization, the greater life-for-profit systems have reached deep roots in and throughout our societies. Just because they have set up powerful systems does not mean that they are just, nor does it mean that their actions are safe or sustainable. Some private entities, businesses, and influencers alike take a personal interest in disconnecting their consumers from certain pieces of information and/or certain aspects of their products. Whether this is their supply line, like materials used, industrial practices, and so on, or their marketing strategies, or even the negative ramifications of their products, these entities will take private interest in keeping the public disconnected from things which they do not wish to be known. In the early days of plastic, there was an increasing outcry from the public about the long-term ramifications of plastic, mainly its inability to biodegrade and the implications that fact had for the planet. As public outcry grew, the plastic industry formulated a way to sneak by. You might be familiar with the recycling symbol, which displays 3 arrows chasing each other in the shape of a triangle. You might also be familiar with the same symbol bearing a number within the center. Much of the public does not know that the numbered symbols do not symbolize the item's ability to be recycled. Rather, they are symbols created by the plastic industry to identify which type of plastic the item is, therefore having no relevance to whether or not the item is actually recyclable. By stealing the image of the recycling symbol, the plastic industry created these almost identical symbols in order to make their product seem less damaging to the planet. These are smart people making calculated moves, and the use of such a symbol was not some innocent coincidence. While the numbers are used to identify which types of plastic something is, helping the recycling process, these symbols do not symbolize that such a product is recyclable, which is the entire point of the recycling symbol in the first place. Knowing this, the plastic industry has continued to use the symbols for decades, deceiving the unsuspecting public who believe the symbols on their recycling bins and on their plastic items to mean the same thing, but they don't. All plastics bear such symbols, identifying what type of substance is being used. One must ask themselves, if the plastic symbol truly was intended to reflect the recyclability of an item, why are some plastics unable to be and therefore never recycled? Plastics 6 and 7 which include styrofoam, polystyrene, are unable to be recycled despite being extremely widely used. These are not accepted at recycling centres as they are not physically able to be recycled with today's accessible technologies. If not recyclable today, why would they bear the symbol of recyclability decades ago? Why do they bear the symbol with the exact image of the symbol for recyclability? This is by design. This is to make people not think twice when using foam containers and other plastic items. This is so people using polystyrene can relate to the symbols on the recycling bins and not hesitate to use the plastic product in front of them. It had the symbol on the recycling bin. I put the item in the recycling bin. I've done my part. There is no harm. I don't have to think twice about it. If the plastic symbols were a design of a sustainable industry, we'd be having a different conversation. But the symbols are products of the plastic industry, connecting the dots between the disconnection and the disconnector. In other damaging industries, marketing is frequently the quiet weapon of those invested in manufactured disconnection. This can take the form of branding, such as factory farm companies with names such as Laughing Cow and Fairlife, where their factory-farmed cows are certainly not laughing, and the use of the term Fairlife brings about questions of what exactly defines a fair life. Would a human born and processed in their facility be considered to be enjoying a fair life? Are the tuners in real life who are destroyed for profits as happy as the mascot of Starkist Tuna, which is a smiling tuna fish? Disconnection is also manufactured in advertising. Take a 2017 Fiji water commercial showing a grimly coloured metropolis background and a foreground bearing the shape of their bottle filled with waterfalls, jungles and other images of paradise. Fiji water is a gift from nature to us, to repay our gift of leaving it completely alone, bottled at the source, untouched by man. The ad then fills the outline of the bottle with the actual image of their plastic bottle, as you would see it in real life. The ultimate irony of this is that we are not leaving nature alone, and after we use their bottle once, it will be discarded into nature, leaving nature to deal with it, even though nature is unable to deal with it. Not to mention the contradictions within this ad. How can we leave nature completely alone, yet bottle its fruit at the source and somehow leave it untouched by man? Under scrutiny, it just doesn't add up. When the dots are connected between disconnector and disconnection, the farce begins to crumble. Why are all plastics labelled with the recycling symbol, even when they cannot be recycled? Which cows are laughing? What is a fair life? If a human were put in that situation, would it be considered fair? How does nature go untouched if the waste suffocates nature and will outlast the humans who discarded it? These are simple examples of the countless attempts at manufactured disconnection seen upon this earth, which lead to damaging consequences as the dots are not connected. Potential sources of negative balancing forces as a result of life-for-profit actions. Balancing forces affect every facet of our lives. Our actions cause reactions, and these action-reaction interactions have ripple effects which echo out into the universe, echoing movements similar to the action-reaction interaction which took place. I'll illustrate what I mean by this very soon, but in some facets of our modern world, we can see balancing forces at work very clearly. Some examples are almost ironic in their presence and serve as a reminder that none of our acts affect us alone, nor are we the only beings who matter or are required for life to continue on this planet. Humans, especially those who partake in large-scale life-for-profit business systems, have a tendency of valuing their monetary interests over almost all other factors, no matter how grave the other factors might be. In attempts to maximize profits, they will go as far as to permanently destroy the very source which they use to fuel their livelihood. Balancing forces can be seen in effect prominently in various aspects of our world. One primary example of this is seen in a common agricultural practice used to obtain beef and other cattle products. Our mass-scale cattle farming practices specifically are the leading cause of deforestation on this planet. Through deforestation for cattle farms, we lose trees and forests in order to make room for breeding cattle. Balancing forces come into play when we look at the reactions put into play through these acts of agricultural practice. The act of destroying trees at such scale, as well as breeding cattle at such scale, releases an unsustainable amount of greenhouse gases into the air, which then go into the atmosphere and trap heat within the planet. Trees, the very thing we just destroyed, are nature's primary tool for dealing with such greenhouse gases. In other words, we destroy forests to create cattle. This destruction and these cattle then produce gases which we then, unironically, need forests to help negate and keep our planet at a healthy, sustainable equilibrium. Trees are citadels of terrestrial life, and their destruction brings the destruction of animals as well. Our practices of deforestation used to create food animals are pushing natural animals to and past the point of extinction. Between 1970 and 2014, the populations of terrestrial forests declined by more than half at around 53%, while populations in Latin America have declined upwards of 94%. Is it any coincidence that the reasons we deforest, mass cattle agriculture, mass disregard for terrestrial life, are the exact same reasons that we need to replant the forests, greenhouse gases, species extinctions for our own planetary survival? These are balancing forces which we put into motion. These are the echoes and ripples of the original act. We commit an action which results in a reaction. It is no coincidence that these reactions echo the original action. It is the same cause-effect nature that pervades the universe we live within. Another example of observable balancing forces on today's planet can be seen where mass-scale fishing practices echo into the absolute destruction of our oceans and sea life. In the relationship between humans' mass fishing practices and the well-being of the oceans, one can observe a direct cause-effect phenomena in which humans obliterate the ocean underfoot in an attempt to catch fish for the seafood industry. A common practice and a source for gathering a huge amount of seafood, fishing trawlers are at the forefront of the major fishing industry. These trawlers drag massive nets at the bottom of the ocean which plough anything in its path into the net. Not only does this indiscriminately damage coral reefs and any life on the seabed, but it also destroys the lives of any creatures who get caught in the net. While pulling the net from the depths, the sea creatures are subject to an incredibly brutal decompression process, as they are yanked from the deep-sea environment that their bodies are used to and quickly drawn to the surface. By the time they reach the surface, many of these lives have already been destroyed. Their eyes and bodies can burst from the change in pressure, as can their internal organs. The tissues that make up their skin can be obliterated, and the fish may be unrecognizable from its true form. They may also get crushed by the weight of the thousands of other fish in the net, as it is tightened and hauled to the surface. Why is this soulless? Because of the barbarically indiscriminate nature of the practice, there are many unintended victims. Ultimately, this method of catching fish works very well for the sole purpose of catching sea life, but it acts without regard for the sea life itself. It is the equivalent of indiscriminately taking every single person walking on a busy sidewalk in a packed city, every single one of them, in an attempt to find only women. The main thing to note is that the people who aren't women still die in this example. We only seek certain types of fish, but the tools we use, nets and hooks, are indiscriminate. The unsought-after sea life that gets caught but is unwanted is called bycatch. Bycatch makes up an estimated 40% of all sea life caught. Bycatch is not just fish. It also includes, but is surely not limited to, seabirds, whales, dolphins, sea turtles, countless invertebrates, and an immense amount of fish species. Over 33 million sharks are caught as bycatch every year, as well as 37 million seahorses. Bycatch are innocent animals that are caught and doomed for no monetary gain. Can you imagine a physical pile of 200 million pounds of animals dead or doomed to die? That's estimated to be the daily output of bycatch caught on this planet. Since bycatch makes up 40% of all that is caught, the fishing practices have a 6-to-4 rate of desired catch to bycatch. This is clearly off the mark. To destroy 4 lives in the name of harvesting 6 others is not a fair trade. So, in the name of catching 6 sought-after catches, this methodology nets an additional 4 catches that are not sought after. To maximize profits, we almost double the catch output. Catch output is a euphemism for lives destroyed. This number varies per animal that is being sought after. As an example, when shrimp are the desired catch, the catch-to-bycatch ratio is closer to a range of 1 to 1 to 1 to 3, meaning there can be 3 times more bycatch than shrimp caught. These numbers are so high because of the very reasons discussed earlier. Shrimp generally hang out around the seabed, so large nets are dragged along the bed in an attempt to catch the shrimp. Unfortunately for both the fishermen and the sea life, the nets sweep anything in their path, so anything else inhabiting the seabed is going to get swept up. This means the fisherman has to also deal with the bycatch. However, the true tragedy is experienced by the individuals who perish. The only reason these practices are so common is because it makes harvesting the 6 sought-after catches so much easier, so much so that it is deemed worth the cost of the 4 other lives that are destroyed unnecessarily. The main problem with this is that what we deem worth is a subjective value based on our own centricism. It might be worth something financially, say, increasing the amount of animals caught and reducing the time taken to catch said amount. But monetary finances do not exist in nature. Our system of monetary finances does not exist in the universe outside of the human realm. Not only this, but the rates we fish at, especially when accounting for our practices and bycatch ratios, are absolutely not sustainable. Since these practices are so gross and unjust, we can expect to be subject to balancing forces which will dish out the consequences for our actions. What could possibly be a resulting balancing force of such gross negligence for sea life? Well, simply the total loss of all sea life. Between 1970 and 2012, the total population of the ocean had been reduced by 49%. We are overfishing the oceans for the fish we desire, and our negligent practices are culling the rest. A simple look at our impact can connect the dots between our practices and the ensuing balancing forces. We fish carelessly and frivolously and the oceans go dead, simple as that. There are many other examples of humans disregarding the life of others and subsequently losing livelihoods in the process as a result of balancing forces. On the grandest scale, this can be exemplified on 2 sides, the cause being humans' widespread disregard for the lives of other beings, and the result being the widespread loss of the lives of other beings across this planet. Earth is currently undergoing its 6th mass extinction. This mass extinction, unlike the previous 5, is not a natural event. Unlike the others, which included events as catastrophic as volcanic activity in Siberia and an asteroid hitting Earth, the current mass extinction is caused solely by humans. According to the 2020 WWF Living Planet report, globally, monitored population sizes of mammals, fish, birds, reptiles and amphibians have declined an average of 68% between 1970 and 2016. Across the globe, major systems have been carelessly destroying the surrounding planet in efforts to sustain their business models. Some of these businesses are necessary for the greater survival of our species, but many of these systems are built and run for the interests of the business owners, not the greater survival of our species and life on Earth. With practices ranging from unsustainably stealing animals out of their natural environment to be sold as pets, to species being hunted to extinction for luxury items made from their body parts, it is no surprise that such widespread life-for-profit practices are literally leading us to widespread dead ends across the planet. If we, as a rule, disregard all life on Earth, we cannot be surprised when all life begins to wane beneath our feet. If we act without care for the lives underfoot, we cannot expect such life to react as if it's been nurtured. It's being destroyed, and it has been destroyed. And with destruction comes all of its ramifications, which is all that was ceasing. Is it really any surprise that the planet is crumbling underneath our careless stomping? Is it really? Are we so blind that we can be taken by surprise by this reality? Is it so difficult to see the direct correlation between our actions and the ramifications which ripple out into the world? When transcending the factors of disconnection, disregard and depersonalization, we can begin to understand how our impact on the planet truly is affecting our future. And we can see exactly how we reap what we sow and will receive exactly what we deserve. Because of disconnection, human life continues on without any thought for its impact. Despite this blind spot, the impact is still felt on the planet, but the day-to-day life of the human goes unperturbed since they are disconnected from the impact. A sort of human privilege, if you will, generally put in place by greater systems. The impact is felt, but we have mastered the art of disconnecting ourselves from that reality, and the truth that our actions create an impact after our interactions with objects. It is almost inherent to our current way of life to pay no mind to the consequences of our actions. You're done with a piece of plastic? Well, throw it away then. After all, the only guideline is to discard it in a wastebasket. However, this does not make the waste suddenly disappear from Earth. The waste is taken away and brought somewhere else. A third greater element that works in tandem with disconnection and disregard is accustomization. This occurs when somebody becomes accustomed to a lifestyle that is disconnected and disregardful. It results in habitual actions that negatively impact the greater picture, yet subconsciously do not appear to the choice maker as even having made an impact, thus making them look past the actions as if they result in no problems at all. One example of the dangers of accustomization can be seen in the use of single-use plastic bags as a frequented method in commercial establishments, and its impact is further evidenced by its semi-recent widespread bans. Once a no-second-thought method of allowing customers to carry out their products, single-use plastic bags have since been banned and barred from being used so frivolously. Why? Because they're extremely damaging to the planet and, when habitually used on a large scale, such as the population of an entire country, they begin to pose a significant threat to both the environment and our well-being. The same actions have also been taken against single-use plastic straws in some places, as well as all other frivolous single-use plastics in others. These small actions are frequented by the public for their convenience and affordability, and for these reasons, many grow familiar and gradually accustomed to using such methods. When one becomes accustomed to such practice, they begin to habitually carry it out without a second thought. The problem is that even without a second thought, it does not mean that the secondary consideration for the greater ramifications should not have been taken, nor does it mean that the impact on the greater picture is any smaller just because the person executing the action doesn't see or care for the greater impact. The exchange does not end at the individual executing their habituated actions. Instead, the exchange continues further. I observed an example of this daily when working at a restaurant. While not an egregious or malicious example, I simply wish to highlight the concept of growing accustomed to something, and not to accost the people mentioned in this example. Some workers would have glasses of various beverages to drink during their shifts. These glasses were generally filled with water and ice, maybe a splash of cranberry, and occasionally filled with soda. Many of these workers would deliberately use one or more single-use plastic straws with their drinks, as it was their preferred method of drinking rather than sipping from the glass itself or using a reusable straw. Generally, upon completion of their drink, they would discard it to the dish pit. When the time came for another drink, they would seek out a fresh beverage, requiring a new straw to be used since the previous straw had been discarded. This is an example of accustomization. The workers grew accustomed to having a new straw with each drink, despite, in most cases, a single straw possessing the capacity to be a reliable, sanitary option throughout the day. One might say, what are they to do? Take the straw out and reuse it after they finish their beverage? Maybe bring a reusable straw, or use no straw at all since it isn't necessarily needed or any more sanitary than drinking from the glass itself. But I'm not here to argue the morality or what should be done. I'm simply pointing towards the phenomena which leads to real ramifications on the planet we live on. In truth and in practicality, a reusable straw or even a plastic single-use could be used safely multiple times without altering the experience of the person drinking. They get safe, clean drinking, and the planet is not burdened to the same extent. The problem here with accustomization is that as somebody grows accustomed to a certain way of doing things, they begin to act in repeated ways. These habitual ways do not necessarily take into consideration or care for the impacts on the greater picture. Rather, they are primarily focused on the desires of the individual who's grown accustomed to such a way of doing things. These actions can be exponentially damaging as they deal with the habitual use of daily items. Let's take a quick inventory of establishments you might pass on a daily basis. You might pass one or more grocery stores during your daily commute, maybe a handful of restaurants and fast food establishments, 2 schools, 3 office buildings, and maybe 1 shopping mall. Each establishment likely sells food items deriving from the major systems we've been discussing, such as overfishing and major cattle farming, whether it be through cafeterias, food courts, or even vending machines. Because a huge amount of Americans' daily meals consist of something that is involved with meat, especially cow or fish or dairy, these establishments must carry many of these products to ensure they have ample supplies for business transactions and basic functioning. Each establishment needs to maintain a constant supply of products to keep their inventories stocked and ready for business. The products must be fresh to adhere to health standards and brand new, since of course food products cannot be reused. One must take a moment to contemplate the weight of this demand and the true costs to maintain such a business model. One must also keep in mind that the inventories are always moving, fluid, and being replenished. These products have a temporary shelf life and inevitably will be wasted if not purchased and consumed in a proper amount of time. Because of the fluid nature of such products, consumed or wasted, they are in a constant, never-ending demand. To meet this never-ending demand, suppliers must provide a never-ending supply of such products, regardless of how they are made. So bear with me for example's sake. Let's say you walk into your local grocery store. Imagine the wall of prepackaged meats which generally line a large wall next to the butcher shop. These meats can come from a variety of places, but just remember that at least one life, one experience of evil was required for the creation of such a product. With no talk of human-centric morality or ethics, observe the raw data and physical reality of the situation, that each product came from an individual animal who physically did experience our hand of evil prior to perishing. So how many meals do you see on this wall? 50? 100? Okay, this is just the butcher meat section. Let's now walk to the freezer aisle of the same store. Let's take a quick inventory of all the frozen goodies requiring experiences of evil. How many are in this section? 150? 200? The boxes are easier to stack, pre-made and less perishable. So there are likely more products here. Therefore, in these 2 sections alone, hundreds of individuals experienced evil in order for this one store to be properly stocked today. Take into account that things such as the butcher's unfrozen meats have a short shelf life, good for only a few days, and will have to be replaced within a short amount of time. Each product will need to be replaced when a customer buys one, and each product will need to be replaced if it sits on the shelf for too long. How many products does this grocery store need to satisfy this ongoing demand? Lots. But that's only one supermarket. There are an estimated 40,000 grocery stores in the United States alone, all needing to have constantly stocked shelves, products ready for purchase, and inventories ready for restocking. Imagine the magnitude of the resources required to supply such demand. Now imagine, on top of this staggering number of grocery stores, the amount of products needed to fulfill the demand of a semi-popular restaurant. Same thing, the restaurant must hold a proper inventory at all times to ensure they can sell their products and remain in business. These products are time-sensitive and will need to be replenished when purchased or after expiration. At the time of writing, there are approximately 660,000 restaurants in the United States, most of which partake in and perpetuate the greater systems of life for profit. Add in all of the schools, workplaces and governmental facilities with cafeterias, in addition to malls with food courts that serve such products daily across the country, who must also stay constantly stocked with time-sensitive products that require an experience of evil in order to be created. Once you have an idea of these 4 example benefactors in your head, grocery stores, restaurants, cafeterias, food courts, you'll begin to see the grandiosity of the scale in question and the reason that such practices can be extremely damaging. The time-sensitive nature of their products makes these systems especially damaging and harmful. When discarded due to being unused, the product was ultimately obtained in vain, and the individual who experienced evil in its attainment experienced such for no reason. They experienced such evil so that we could keep the wheels of our business system rolling, not to ensure the survival of our species. For the business owner, even if it means wasting some product, it is simply the nature of their business and is worth the loss or waste. On top of all of this, it's important to mention that plastic is very frequently used as the primary method of packing these types of products. Whether used to protect perishables for longer shelf life, internal packaging to contain products like cereal, or as the bags to carry out groceries, plastic is frivolously used in these locations. This means that plastic is wasted during the production of these products and will further burden the planet once it has been discarded. The plastics create a tomb for unused products, which will prevent the organic materials from properly decomposing when reintroduced into nature. Although this might be a blessing, as the greenhouse gas emissions from our biodegradable food coming out of landfills is also a leading cause of carbon and methane. This biodegrading causes landfills to account for 15% of methane gases, meaning, in tandem with manure management, 9% and enteric fermentation, 27% cow industry, the overconsumption and production of food, a large source of the biodegradable matter wasted every day, accounts for 51% of all methane. This is more than natural gas and petroleum systems, 32%, and coal mining, 6% combined. Asterisk 2020 US methane emissions by source, EPA. Gov. For the first time in human history, the luxury of desirable food is at our fingertips. Instead of hunting and gathering, we have the convenience of picking and choosing exactly what we want to eat from a wide variety of products that are readily available every single day, near regardless of the time of year or location. This luxury does not come without its consequences, although the business systems perpetuating such luxuries try to keep these consequences out of sight and out of mind. Many of our local eateries and food suppliers use products from damaging business systems which are harmful to the greater perpetuation of life on Earth. The products in these locations operate to meet an insatiable human-centric demand, which is ironic because it is the business of satiation. The endless demand for such products creates serious problems, primarily when the products cost so much for their creation, thus snowballing to greater and greater consequences when paired alongside major systems such as plastics. The weight of convenience today comes in the form of perpetuating evil systems, increasing damage to the planet, and making tomorrow's Earth more difficult to survive on. Cost the loss of... If someone were to take a piece of paper and ask you, how much did this cost? What would the answer be? For example's sake, let's say the piece of paper has a $1 price tag. We could safely say that the paper costs $1, yes? Sure, it does cost $1 to buy said paper. The paper to the consumer costs $1 where they trade $1 for it. But the paper did not cost $1 to the business who sold it. So, while the paper costs $1 to the customer, the true cost of the paper needs to be traced further back, because it did not merely appear there with the price tag, it went on quite a trip before getting to that point. By the time the paper reached the point of being sold to the consumer, it was then engaged in an equilateral trade, where the business owner makes their profit and the customer gets their product, an even trade. So if this is an even trade and something cannot come from nothing, where does the cost of the paper come from? Before reaching the sales shelf at the seller's store, the seller had to buy the paper from a distributor or directly from the source, a paper manufacturer, or the seller might even be the source. Regardless of where the paper came from, to be obtained, it is engaged in an equilateral trade. The seller purchases the paper or pays to create the paper. Since the seller is paying for the paper or the supplies for its creation, they are also engaged in an equilateral trade as to perpetuate their business model. The seller pays for and receives the supplies to sell. This is what the seller and the supplier want, and therefore they are engaged in an equilateral trade. So, where does the cost of the paper come from? Ultimately, the cost for the paper must come from a party which is not engaged in these equilateral trades. You may have noticed that these equilateral trades are all man-made. This is because it's business, a man-made construct for man-made gain. The definition of cost speaks of loss, not of trade or profit. Cost comes at a loss, and business does not operate at a loss. Some may temporarily, but business does not sustain in such a manner. The cost of the paper, therefore, does not have to do with the business, and rather has to do with the resource itself, the supply which is at a loss in the creation of the product. The cost of the piece of paper is the life and body of the tree and nothing more. The supplies and overhead that go into transforming the tree into the paper are all collateral which the business risks in order to profit from. The guaranteed cost, the definite impact, the loss, is felt, not necessarily literally felt, by the resource which is being taken. There was a tree, now there is not, the tree is lost, the paper cost the tree. So in systems which require mass deforestation to sustain a business, what is the cost? The deforestation is the cost, not the monetary values that the business incurs to perpetuate their beloved system. Such a cost on the side of the business does not exist. It is an investment. It is not a loss. The business is acting out an exchange that is an equilateral trade rather than a loss. They choose to do this as it's their desire, and in their interest to spend money and resources to make money and resources. They are nurturing their system. There is no loss involved, even if they are not making profit. From a human-centric perspective, one might believe loss to be experienced, but ultimately, when viewing from a greater sense, there is no loss experienced as it is a trade. The only cost is that those who truly lose by receiving no trade back to them. In systems where meat is the product, where does the true cost lie? Where is the ultimate loss? Well, the meat comes from the animal, yes. The product comes from the body of a creature, so the cost is the life and body of the animal, which is only felt by the animal itself. So the animal is the one losing something, as it is literally losing its life. Sure, the business is losing the resource of one animal, but they also gain the resource of one product, so therefore the business is engaged in an equilateral trade. The only true loss, the cost, comes from that which is losing, that which causes the loss of. The loss of life is a cost to the individual who is losing its life. Monetary cost is not equivalent to physical cost in life-for-profit systems. This is simply because these business systems are built to trade life for profit. The emphasis of this point is on profit. They aim to profit off their business actions, meaning they will inherently aim to achieve something greater than a one-to-one cost-to-sell trade. So if cost is that which causes the loss of, then to determine the true cost of things, we must view exchanges and ask ourselves who is truly losing, who is at a loss after the exchange. If they engage in a trade, then there is no cost, and because something cannot come from nothing, the cost must be found in an exchange further down the prior line of exchanges leading up to the exchange in question. Trades do not cost anything because there is no loss and no cause of a loss. A trade is always equilateral in some way. With a loss comes one who loses, a victim. Business transactions do not create victims, but harvesting resources can. So when viewing systems, life for profit or life for life, it is important to bear witness and understand who is truly bearing the cost, who is truly paying for the desired product, and where the desired product is coming from. With an understanding of the true bearer of the cost, we can begin to view things from a less human-centric paradigm, which will give us a greater understanding of the true realities of our actions, humans and animals. Subconscious solipsism. There is a philosophical concept called solipsism that describes the idea that the only thing we have direct access to is our own mind, thoughts, consciousness and experience, and therefore we cannot truly know that other minds exist. In short, according to Oxford Languages, solipsism is the view or theory that the self is all that can be known to exist. This theory appears to be sound from an individual standpoint, as there is no way to physically experience the experience that another individual is experiencing. The concept of solipsism describes the subconscious blind spot within many humans who do not validate or believe in the experience of animals. Through the guise of solipsism, how could one know that animals are experiencing, or even that humans are experiencing? This is the problem that many do not face and therefore go their whole life without questioning. Instead, simply subconsciously believing that animals are mindless automata, without feelings and automated. If I were to fall and scrape my knee, screaming out of pain, I can understand the direct reason why I'm screaming. I feel the pain. However, if another individual were to fall, scrape their knee and scream out of pain, I, an observer, can only draw conclusions about the reason for the individual screaming. I am missing a vital chunk of information. That is the physical sensation of pain. Since I cannot feel this pain, which another is experiencing, I cannot say for sure that it exists. This is the theory of solipsism at work. Philosophically, I can argue as far as saying that the pain does not exist because it does not exist to me. Whatever is felt by another cannot be accessed by me, cannot be proven by me, and cannot be known by me. And therefore there is no evidence that anything took place. This is a paraphrased quote from Philosophy Vibe's video, Solipsism and the Problem of Other Minds. While somewhat philosophically sound, logically it is difficult to argue otherwise with someone who wholeheartedly believes in a solipsistic point of view. There are some very concerning implications of adopting and believing such a stance. First and foremost, if one believes that their mind is the only mind that truly exists, because it cannot be proven that other minds exist, and therefore it can only be known that their mind exists, this highlights a couple of things. First, it says that either the entire universe was created solely for the individual in question, or that the individual in question created the entire universe as a conceptual experience for themselves. In either case, the individual pretty much believes themselves to be God, and believes the entire universe to not matter and not exist without their eyes laying upon it. This is a standpoint that is dangerously human-centric. Inference is the best explanation. What's necessary to overcome such centric views is a level of inference. We may not be able to know for sure, but we can draw conclusions from what we do know. If falling and scraping my knee causes me to scream in pain, then I should be able to safely infer that another scraping their knee and screaming is similarly experiencing pain such as I had. Inferring is a type of regard. We must go slightly out of our way to place ourselves in the shoes of others, inferring their experience in relation to the experiences we know to be. To view actions which we relate to and understand as null is a dangerous paradigm to operate from for anybody who falls in your path, wake, or underfoot. Reason is not only rooted in the body, our bodies, but in the physical and instinctual realm which we share with animals. As Laycroft and Johnson write, reason is evolutionary in that abstract reason builds on and makes use of perpetual motus inferens present in lower animals. Reason is thus not an essence that separates us from other animals, rather it places us on a continuum with them. The Master and His Emissary, Ian McGilchrist. A common belief amongst the subconscious of humans in modern society is that animals are unfeeling automatons, not reacting through consciousness, but are instead driven by instinct, a universal super-instinct which accounts for all reactions, leaving no mental capacity for creative, reactive, individualistic thinking. Thought to be different from the instincts which dwell within humans, which we may generally see as things like reasoning, intuition, gut feelings, and that which makes split-second decisions. Many humans believe animals to be driven by some special type of instinct which overrides and replaces their abilities for sentience and rational thinking, as well as their capacity for feelings and emotions, and their ability to think and experience life as an individual. I will be referring to this human-created concept of instinct that is so frequently thought to be the only capacity possessed by non-human animals as super-instinct. This super-instinct has been used to explain everything and minimizes clearly observable emotional phenomena such as mourning, excitement, fear, and social bonding. The belief of this super-instinct leads to a major blind spot in humans who are believed to be the evolved, intelligent beings. I believe many humans subconsciously believe in this super-instinct because of something called an egocentric predicament. Egocentric predicament is a term that was first coined in the Journal of Philosophy in 1910 by Ralph Barton Perry. The term describes the problem of not being able to view reality outside of our own perceptions. It says that all worldly knowledge takes form as mental representations that our mind examines in different ways. Essentially, all we know is what we know, and we can only explain what we don't know with what we do know. Everything we perceive goes through the filter of our mind, and that's all we perceive, the filtered information of our mind. Within the terms of an egocentric predicament, a human who does not wish to see an animal as an experiencing individual will not see the animal as such. Instead, the human will merely see a non-human animal as a non-human animal, one which an unwilling onlooker would not possibly relate to, and therefore could not possibly relate to, and will thus automatically subconsciously not relate to the animal. If a human subconsciously cannot understand that pain can be felt without one's eyes wincing, then how can such a human know that a fish who does not possess eyelids is feeling pain? Of course, I mean besides the clearly observable behavioral evidence of the fish flailing, fighting, breathing heavily, and struggling against the stimulus. But in reality, those factors are frequently overlooked. If the human is looking for an indicator that pain is being experienced, and the indicator they're subconsciously looking for is a wincing in the eyes, then they will never see a fish in pain, and might go as far as to believe that the fish is not in pain, even though the fish is physically experiencing pain. Humans seldom are subconsciously willing to open their perceptions to the unspoken lives and feelings of animals, of the individuals within the creatures, operating their body as we are operating ours. Since they are different, many of us find ourselves in an egocentric predicament where we believe the animal's experience does not exist because we cannot understand it. If a human cannot fathom the eyesight of an eagle, they may believe the eagle's hunting strategy to be driven by this super instinct, not skill. If a human cannot fathom an elephant's past, the human will likely think the elephant's ability to find water in a drought to be a result of this super instinct, not memory. If a human cannot fathom a fish feeling pain, then they will likely chalk up the fish's flailing and distress to the fish's super instinct rather than a response to the pain itself. The subconscious belief in this super instinct allows humans to cognitively disregard or blind themselves to animals and their experience. A human might see two chimpanzees grooming each other, know them to be grooming each other for social bonding, yet not believe that the chimps are two individuals capable of emotions and sociality, two critical components to any bonding. This super instinct is also used as a justification for fear. A pig clearly showing signs of fear is thought not to be experiencing such fear, only that it is mindlessly, instinctually reacting to the situation, but not perceiving or experiencing the situation or feeling any emotions from it. The blind onlooker truly believes that the pig is somehow exhibiting the experience of fear without the existence of the experience of emotional fear being present within the pig. Did you find it difficult to make sense of that last sentence? It is hard to make sense of because it does not make sense. It is unjust, just as the pig is experiencing the fear, and this reality cannot be negated or avoided. The pig is displaying the experience of fear for no other reason than the fact that it is actively experiencing the experience of fear. The logic in defense of the super instinct is riddled in humanistic fallacies. It makes no sense to believe animals' behaviors are a result of anything greater than emotions and reactions, as if animals are some type of organic computers which are preset to react to every situation they come across without experiencing and processing the reaction themselves. If not consciousness, then what is it? Throughout time and human history, we have grown with and alongside animals, from being peers, even prey, of primal beasts such as big cats and other large predators millennia ago, to now playing God at the press of a button or pull of a trigger. Humans have experienced animals as superiors, equals and underlings. Cultures throughout human history have treated and viewed animals very differently. Many cultures who live with large predatory animals have respect for the individual behind the eyes of the beasts. Take a look at communities who are familiar with the tigers in the forests surrounding their village. They know and respect these beasts as the individuals they are. They are aware that the tigers are individuals who recognize and remember, and therefore the humans act accordingly, as a vendetta from a tiger might spell the end of one's life. Is this because the tiger is a robot like the Terminator, put on this planet to exterminate humans? No, it is because the tiger is an individual that might decide to end your life because you made eye contact with it, which is an offense that has also led to many human-on-human deaths. Many cultures, like the Native Americans and Buddhists, respect the life and individuals which lay beyond the eyes of all the animals on this planet, no matter whether they are big or small. Despite the widespread, well-known, long-time understanding of the existence of consciousness in other animals, much of today's modern citizens disacknowledge this existence, or simply don't believe it at all. Where does this come from? Is it because we so frequently see animals in non-natural environments, such as on screens in tanks and on farms, and we therefore don't see them in their natural habitat? Is it because of influences from the powers that be? What has caused such an evolved society to become so blind to something we've known for so long? Many humans and human-centric systems ignore or disbelieve in the experience of individual animals. Frequently, this physically takes form as the human disregarding the animal's experience and subconsciously believing the animal to be an inferior being. In humans thinking that animals are the inferior being, they lose sight of the animal's individuality and in turn become the truly blind beings. They begin to think that animals are completely void of experience or feeling, hence why unsuspecting humans have moments of "he's really smart for a dog. He thinks he's a child." The animals are always experiencing, processing their surroundings, calling upon conscious and subconscious cues, learned and inherent behaviors, and in-moment decisions to shape their actions. The moments of relatability come from a brief window within the observing human, where they view the true nature of the animal. It is not as though the animal is having a fleeting moment of some type of humanism. What's changing in these circumstances of humans comprehending and acknowledging the animal's individuality is the human's perspective, not the animal's. The animal does not have moments of humanism or sporadic moments of human-like thought patterns and behaviors, which the human then observes in a quick, fleeting moment, only for the animal to return back to mindless automation shortly thereafter. In reality, though most are wild and primal, the animal is always actively animated, experiencing and processing its surroundings, resulting in behaviors which observing humans might recognize and relate to. It is the observing human who is projecting their ideas of animal behavior versus human behavior onto the unsuspecting animal, and it is only when the human views something which they recognize as human or non-animal that they see the individualistic nature of the animal. In truth, if the human remained open to seeing the animal's individuality at all times, they would likely witness many more behaviors which they could recognize and relate to. Instead of seeing two birds on a branch, tweeting, twitching, shaking, lifting legs and moving heads, they would see two individuals communicating in one regard or another, both verbal and non-verbal, the same way humans communicate. Though they're not speaking our language, it is not impossible nor difficult to see the communications between non-human animals, especially if the observer is aware of the near-endless variety of non-verbal communications seen throughout nature. But even if the structures in their brains differ from ours, and these differences mean that they probably experience things differently, that certainly doesn't mean that emotions in animals are inherently impossible. It simply means that it is more difficult for us to imagine what their emotions might feel like. Though we all are experiencing things differently, one thing that we do all share is that we are experiencing an experience. We are experiencing things as the ant is experiencing things. We are experiencing things differently, but we are both experiencing at the very same time. We might not be experiencing certain sensations to the extent which the ant is experiencing them, nor is the ant experiencing things to the extent which we are experiencing them, but both the ant and us are experiencing. There is no measurement of the conscious experience, there simply is consciousness. Though it is nearly impossible to define exactly what consciousness is, a definition that expresses the reality of consciousness says that it's the thing that feels like something. It is the spark of life which we experience at the very center of our being, not necessarily the physical center, but the spiritual center, and where our experience of the experiences comes from. One of the primary characteristics of consciousness is one's reactions to its surrounding world. Whether this is a human jumping out of the way from a train, a dog excited that their owner just arrived home, or an ant perceiving and responding to a threat, many of the actively conscious creatures we come across are reacting to their surroundings. This is instead of automatically acting as a robot and executing preset patterns as some humans subconsciously believe animals to be doing. Many, if not all, conscious things show a reactive relationship with the environment around them. Life forms such as many animals possess what I call animate domain, which is the capacity that allows them to react to stimulus immediately in our frame of time. Unlike plants, which react on a vastly different timeline, while things like flies have vastly different lifespans and time frames to us humans, they are still able to react in real time to their surroundings. I have never seen a tree flinch at an incoming chainsaw, but I've seen a small fly react to an incoming hand. Consciousness is the baseline of something that is experiencing, but that does not mean that it is the only factor to be taken into consideration when observing the experience of individuals. Two other factors to be taken into consideration when considering the experience of an individual is one's sentience and cognition. The baseline experience of consciousness in pair with the two faculties of sentience and cognition ultimately make up one's reality and ability to react independently towards their surroundings. Sentience is one's capacity to experience feelings and sensations, while one's cognition is their mental capacity to intake, process, retain, and manipulate information. While cognition can generally be tested, sentience is a little more difficult to quantify and gauge. Let's use a quick example to illustrate the differences between these three elements. Take a hawk, for example. The hawk being alive, awake, and experiencing is the hawk being conscious. The hawk might be experiencing a wide array of specific emotions and states, such as hunger, fear, aggression, and pain, which would all be a result of their sentience. The hawk having capabilities such as building social hierarchies in communities, powerful vision and aerial hunting prowess, with their ability to learn to utilize these skills, is a function of their cognitive capacity. Now let's put the hawk next to a crow. Notice how a crow possesses the same faculties as the hawk: awake and moving, experiencing life, active socio-survival strategies, and yet the two are very different creatures. Yet both are equally as alive and experiencing. The crow possesses strengths and weaknesses of its own, such as weaker eyes and a much different strategy for obtaining food. But does that mean the crow is any less of a being than the hawk? Even though the crow's eyes are weaker than the hawk's, does that mean the crow is experiencing life any less vividly? Even though the crow does not hunt and execute with the same cognitive functions as the hawk, does that make the crow's experience any less vivid or show that it isn't as intelligent as the hawk? The same is true about humans, an animal, and the rest of animals. Animals each have our consciousness, which is our possession of whatever the experiencing, enlivening spark sitting at the driver's seat of our bodies is, while at the same time the different types of animals possess varying capacities to experience sensations and to process and retain the world around them to be used in the future. Because most animals possess all three of these capacities, consciousness, sentience, cognition, the discussion of how our experience differs from the experience of others is a matter of degree, not kind. Animals experience stimulations on a large scale of intensities, meaning some may experience certain stimuli more than humans, and some might experience the same stimuli less so. This further means that animals possess the same fundamental capacities responsible for the stimulus that is experienced in humans, and therefore it can be reasonably deduced that they are also experiencing similar stimuli. A matter of degree, not kind, means that our differences lay in the vast grey scale of experiences rather than animals being on a totally different scale altogether. I could write an entire book about the social and interpersonal lives of fish. However, I am only going to graze the topic to illustrate some examples of the depth and complexity of our subnautical cousins. Many humans are quick to forget our Homo sapien roots on the tree of life. Though some believe that humans simply appeared on Earth, today's science supports the claim that we evolved from land animals on this planet, and those land animals evolved from sea animals. Because of this, not only did we come from sea creatures, but sea creatures also evolved alongside us. All the while we evolved. So while we were busy evolving arms and legs and lungs to even be able to function in our environment, sea creatures were busy optimizing their bodies and brains. The ocean bears great diversity and coexistence, teeming with examples of socialization, civilization, and culture between species. What is commonly referred to as fish is actually a group which currently makes up 60% of all known vertebrate species on the planet. The term fish refers to a group that has more species than all mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians combined. Commonly disregarded by humans, the great diversity of the ocean holds many examples which shine a light on our own humanity, showing capacities which we know as our own yet are clearly observable in these creatures who share common ancestors with us. This is overlooked and/or goes unseen as humans frequently do not regard the experiencing lives of fish. As one example of humans misunderstanding these creatures, many believe fish to be silent and daft to communication, but fish do in fact talk amongst each other. Only we cannot hear this. Fish communicate with subsonic clicks, moans, and countless other noises and undulations. Water is a very good conductor of sound waves, much better than air, which means that sounds are a viable method of survival and communication underwater. The main reason we humans cannot hear these noises is because as the sound waves reach the surface, they are reflected by the surface and do not pierce through. Since sound waves reflect at the top and bounce away from the surface, the sounds are contained within the water itself. At the same time, many of the noises are also subsonic and outside of a human's range of audible noises. So, even if we were beneath the surface of the water, we may still be unable to hear these communications. However, just because we cannot hear them does not mean they're not making noise, and just because we cannot understand them does not mean they are not communicating with each other. Besides audible communications, the ocean is filled with countless other forms of communication, such as body language, group coordination, and personal light shows. For communication to take place, there must be two parties looking to achieve a middle ground of understanding, where both parties have ideas in their heads and have to express them to each other. Through understanding these expressions, the parties who are communicating can reach understanding and execute their actions in an effort to achieve the desired outcome. Bioluminescence, electrical pulses, and physical gestures, even between different species, are all forms of communication found within the ocean. A well-documented phenomena, groupers will use a specific motion towards an eel to signal the beginning of a coordinated hunting effort. The grouper will do this specific motion, and if agreed upon, the two will swim away together and begin a coordinated hunting effort. As the eel swims into a reef in an attempt to flush out prey, the grouper will wait outside for those that flee. If the prey stays in the reef, they are met by the eel. If the prey flees, they will be caught by the grouper. A well-executed, coordinated effort by two different sea creatures initiated by communication and mutual understanding. Within coral reefs, another well-known phenomena is cleaning stations. These cleaning stations are spots on the reef where cleaners, such as cleaner wrasses and shrimp, tend to other fish daily by cleaning parasites and other impurities from off their clients. Many larger fish use these services without eating or aggressing the smaller fish that is servicing them. Even animals, such as sharks, commonly and peacefully use these services. Fish, such as the surgeonfish, will change their color from dark colors to a bright blue during the cleaning, and observing scientists believe this behavior to be a deliberate act to signal the fish's desire to be cleaned, as well as to potentially assist the cleaners in spotting parasites. Cleaning stations are a common thing found on reefs and are used by locals and travellers alike. The cleaning stations generally only operate during the day, as the cleaners sleep during the night. Ultimately, the cleaners get food and the clients get cleaned. Sounds a bit like service work and bartering, doesn't it? only open during the day in the same spot daily, physical labor in exchange for sustenance. Sounds a bit familiar, does it not? These are just a few examples of similarities we can see between humans and fish communication and actions which seem second nature to everyday life. Humans are quick to disregard fish, but maybe it's time to take a moment to reflect and appreciate the fact that while we evolved from them, they've been evolving themselves all the while. Circling back to the topics of the actions caused by mass systems of life for profit, one can see a disconnection between the cost of the action and the benefit of the action. This differentiation in energy exchange creates an imbalance in equilibrium of the universe. Let's take the interaction between two individuals, keeping both experiences in mind and view how their exchanges intersect at different points of time. A fish is living its life, a regular day at the bottom of the ocean, when it is suddenly caught by a fishing net and is being dragged to the surface. While quickly ascending to the surface, it suffers a brutal decompression process, leaving its right eye and swim bladder burst. Now doomed but not dead, the fish struggles as it gets crushed amongst the many others trapped within the net. A flailing fish tail whips the burst eye socket, causing additional excruciating pain. After being hauled above the deck of the boat, the fish is dropped onto the trawler's deck and left for minutes, where it ultimately suffocates, perishing in pain, aghast, and suffering horribly. A mother goes to the supermarket looking for food to feed her family with. Choosing between pasta and a fish fillet, she decides to buy the fish to fry and make fish sandwiches. She makes dinner and feeds her family. The husband enjoys it. It's a good home-cooked meal. One of the kids likes it, but the other kid doesn't. After dinner, their family has some dessert while sitting in front of the TV. The night progresses, the kids go to bed, and the parents find themselves in bed for the night. Before falling asleep, the husband says that dinner was really great tonight, honey, thank you. The mother feels adorned and goes to sleep happy. The next day comes around, the family eats 3 more meals, having something different for dinner. They continue this for the next week, through the next year, through until the kids go to college. Life goes on. The fish and the consumer, the mother who bought it, are inexplicably connected through the chain of exchanges which cause their paths to cross. However, there is a severe difference in degree of experience between the two individuals involved in these connected events. There is a clear lack of equivocation and a downsizing of the impact to the individual from the initial exchange, the fish being brutally destroyed and killed, and the resulting exchange, the mother providing 1 meal for the family. Need we mention the experience of the inevitable fish caught as bycatch in this net, who were destroyed in vain? This is not to say that the feeding of the family is not a just, good action. I am merely pointing towards the difference in degree of experience that is experienced between the two parties involved. The degree of experience is exponentially different for the two parties involved, and not to mention the results for the mother are not even guaranteed to be positive, while the results for the fish are guaranteed to be hell on earth. If the mother is lucky, the family will eat, enjoy the meal, and forget about hunger for a couple of hours. If the fish is lucky, literal death will bring an end to their awful suffering. We guarantee an entire universe of suffering in the efforts to hopefully have a minor level of fleeting comfort, enjoyable satiation. Said universe of suffering is literally, physically a universe of suffering, an individual experiencing the physical hand of evil, gruesome, cruel, merciless evil. The worst physical sensations so bad that the individual will not survive, being brought unto and experienced by the beings of this planet. In many circumstances, the euphoria and satisfaction sought after could very easily be created through other means, while still fulfilling the exact job perfectly well. Imagine the mother choosing the pasta, which the family would also love. She would still be fulfilling the task of providing an enjoyable dinner. Such euphoria is fleeting as well, generally lasting the length it takes to experience it. That is, when eating a sandwich, it is only experienced while eating and shortly after. Then such sensations disappear completely. But on the front side of the energetic exchange, the suffering is for an eternity. A life is viciously brutalized, painfully stinted and cut short. The most incredulous pain, vividly horrific experience one could experience, so bad that the victim will not survive, is brought into the universe at the hand of a perpetrator who is only causing such suffering for a personal minute gain. There is a clear imbalance in such exchanges. This is sure to upset the equilibrium of the universe, given the heinously selfish nature behind the actions committed, not necessarily pointing towards the intention of the mother, rather referring to the greater systems which brought forth the product the mother purchased. Such a disparity is exaggerated and exacerbated when the products are wasted. When food is thrown out, wasted and untouched or discarded due to cosmetic imperfections, this differentiation in energy is amplified. Such practices ultimately make the death and suffering of the victim to be in vain. We commit a universe of horror for an outcome that we don't even utilize, throwing it in the trash, acting as if it is worthless. It is not worthless. It is the energy of creation which we are destroying in the name of for-profit business systems, leading such creative energy to a dead-end monetary value which only serves the human realm, being unable to reintegrate back into the natural world if unutilized. We frequently have a hard time seeing how our actions impact the world surrounding us, as our daily habits bring with them a layer of complacency, which causes us to act without being fully engaged with all aspects of our movements. In every interaction between humans, non-human animals, and everything else we might interact with, including money and all other inanimate objects, there has been a chain reaction of interactions that led to the very action which is present in front of us. There is also a following chain reaction of interactions that come after said action. I refer to these actions, interactions, and reactions as exchanges. Exchanges are ultimately the individual micro and macro interactions between all. Two humans engaging in a fight is an exchange between two humans. Buying a plastic bag is an exchange between the purchaser and the bag. Making a decision to take a left turn instead of a right turn is an exchange between the decision maker and the decision. These intersecting lines of reality, such as the reality that is the plastic bag and the reality that is the purchaser of said bag, create the exchanges within the present moment. The exchanges in the present moment are influenced and set up by the past and influence the future. The constant linking of cause and effect allows us to take part as a link in the chain of exchanges. Each exchange is, physically and directly, intersectionally connected to the exchanges which led up to the exchange in question and the future exchanges that will take place as a result. Exchanges act like the links of a chain link. Each link is an exchange, and the chain is ultimately an infinite timeline of the various exchanges that have taken place and will take place, leading and linking to one another. Exchanges are directly linked to all prior and future exchanges, meaning every preceding exchange is a cause of each that follows. Exchanges take place in single moments, but come from a long chain of separate exchanges prior to the one in question. These are directly linked to the resulting infinite chain of exchanges that take place after them. An example of an exchange can be somebody ordering a fish dinner from a restaurant. The exchange we're observing is the ordering and consumption of such fish plate. This single action was made possible by a preceding line of exchanges, which included the person becoming hungry, deciding to eat out, choosing this particular restaurant over others, as well as a separate line of exchanges such as the fish being caught, killed, prepared, transported, and ultimately purchased and delivered to the table for consumption. This choice also precedes the following line of exchanges which occur afterwards, such as the consumer leaving the restaurant, going home, and whatever else follows in the course of their life. This means the fish arriving in front of the customer would not be possible without the preceding line of events having taken place, and inevitably, the preceding line of events takes place as a direct result of the exchange in question. Another quick example of an exchange can be somebody using a plastic bag for however long and then throwing it in the garbage. The garbage is then taken to a dumpster, which is taken to a processing facility where it eventually makes its way to the ocean. While in the ocean, the bag sinks to the bottom where a fish swims into it. The fish becomes trapped and ultimately suffocates on the bag, perishing, unheard by any humans. In both of these examples, the fish plate and the plastic bag example, one can see that the two parties involved in an exchange might be crossing paths at different points in time. The time between the plastic bag being thrown in the garbage and it suffocating a fish might be separated by months, yet the two events are physically directly linked to each other, as the person who wasted the plastic has pawned it onto nature's shoulders to burden. A burden which then weighs upon the fish who suffocates. Even though there are two parties involved in exchanges, this does not mean that we have to label either side as being right or wrong. When observing exchanges, there is no necessity to point fault towards either side. These are simply links in an infinite intersection of chains coming together. This does not mean that either party is or isn't guilty and absolved of guilt, but rather means that, as observers of exchanges, we should take a step back and view such links objectively, instead of internalizing and rationalizing one side or the other. The presence and observance of exchanges is simply to bring attention to the reality of the situation. A person using a plastic bag is not malicious, and the use of the bag is not necessarily unjust. But that does not lessen the impact that such a plastic bag will have if it takes one or more lives after being discarded. By viewing exchanges objectively, we can trace back the roots of our actions and see things how they truly are, whether or not we'd like to face such realities. With knowledge of exchanges, one can observe how actions are directly linked with physical outcomes in the world, even if out of sight. Once we become familiar with observing exchanges, we can have a better perspective towards how the exchanges in our lives impact the world around us. Once we are aware of the exchanges we take part in, we can begin to see how our choices affect the world we touch. Through this awareness of observing our impact, we can begin to consciously make choices which will better skew the future in a positive direction. No action is in vain. With every action, there is a reaction. No matter how big or small, each action and reaction makes up, determines, and affects the greater outcome of the preceding universe. With such actions and reactions, which are also actions, the preceding universe is forever changed, even slightly. These changes, no matter how small, amount to large differences in the grand scheme and literally physically skew the entire preceding existence that comes after the action in question. The preceding universal path is constantly being changed by minute decisions and exchanges in the moment on an individual level. Small changes at one point in time can spell incredibly differing future universes down the line. A famous example of this is the butterfly effect. In the butterfly effect, as Wikipedia says, a small change in one state can result in large differences in a later state. The term butterfly effect refers to a theoretical phenomenon that describes how the conditions which form a tornado are influenced by minor perturbations, such as a butterfly flapping their wings weeks prior. In life, every exchange physically skews the universe. Because all falls into the dual-pole nature of yin and yang, the skew will ultimately go in one of either direction, depending on the judgment from a single perspective. Skews act simultaneously in both poles. What's good to one might be bad for another. Killing a chicken for dinner brings us food and feeds our family while bringing an end to the universe of the chicken. Throwing a plastic bag in a stream rids us of the burden of the plastic bag and gives it to nature to deal with. Since things are never at balance, and instead are always in flux, few, if any, things can act without creating a skew, and therefore every exchange one partakes in will skew things for the better or for the worse by standards of any single perspective. Each action we take physically skews the rest of our lives, and simultaneously, because the world does not revolve around us, skews the entire surrounding universe. The skew begins at a single point in time, and everything continues accordingly afterwards. The term skew is aimed to animate the concept and truth that our actions have reactions which lead to lasting effects on the world. While the dichotomous nature of the universe pervades all things, skews exist in both poles of yin and yang within exchanges. For example, if I buy a plastic bag, my life positively skews. In my perspective, as my trip from the grocery store is made easier, life goes better. And if you were to ask me, It was a good decision that contributed positively to my life. While at the same time the well-being of the planet and amount of plastic waste skews negatively, as now the plastic has been condoned, consumed, and will inevitably have to be discarded. Similarly, in a meal where I decide to eat a mass-produced beef burger, my hunger will be satiated and my body will be given nutrients, skewing things positively from my perspective, while at the same time condoning and contributing to the destructive processes of mass cattle farming, skewing things negatively for the greater well-being of life on this planet. Similar to drinking a Bloody Mary that is garnished with shrimp, which takes some edge off your hangover but cause the bycatch of 3 fish for each shrimp used. Frequently in the cases of seafood, mass-produced beef, and plastic, the skews we cause are selfishly centred, and the counterbalancing negative skew is ultimately more damaging to our planet than the positive skew to ourselves is worth. Many of the positive skew results we experience can be achieved by alternatives and other sources, while the negative skew caused by our actions leads to lasting damage and destruction on Earth, our source of nutrition. In many cases, the intention behind actions is what matters. Habitual intention to do positive for sustainable life will yield a positive skew for the planet and sustainable life. Habitual disregard for sustainable life will yield a negative skew for the planet and sustainable life. So, though something might be good for one human, that does not mean that it is ultimately good and that the action does not negatively affect the planet. Small, everyday actions which seem to be in vain and of no consequence in the moment turn out to not be in vain and end up perpetuating and reinforcing the subtle motivations behind the actions, such as disregard and disconnection leading to further customization. Add this up across mass populations of humans who do not care about their contributions to the negative skew, and you have one steep downhill slope actively leading and pushing us away from sustaining life on this planet. There are some practices that are non-malicious in intent and execution, yet are actions we do as a result of practices that value luxury over the experience of others and the greater good of life on this planet. Something like litter is not necessarily done with malicious intent towards the victim it will ultimately affect. Generally, on individual and greater scales, litter happens when a human possesses non-biodegradable waste and desires to rid themselves of it, therefore profiting from ridding themselves of the waste while lacking the proper facilities to dispose of it. On an individual level, this might be a lack of a garbage can in close proximity. On a greater level, it might be a country that has too much garbage and is looking to get rid of it. Regardless of which level this goes on, whether an individual throwing a plastic bag in a stream or a country dumping their waste directly into the ocean, the actions are done with intent to rid the doer of the garbage, not necessarily to burden the planet with the waste. As a result, however, the ecosystems underfoot will be the ones to bear the consequences. A fish is swimming through the ocean and suddenly finds itself having swam headfirst into the inside corner of a clear Ziploc plastic bag. Unable to swim backwards in such constraints, the fish is likely doomed unless a stroke of fate favours it and some outside event intervenes. Without intervention from some other force, the fish will likely perish from suffocation, starvation, and sheer inability to move. The fish, unable to swim, might catch the eye of a larger fish, who too does not see the clear plastic bag or know what it is. The larger fish may then gulp up the smaller fish, not knowing that the plastic bag surrounding it would too seal its own fate. As the larger fish swallows the smaller fish, the bag gets caught in its throat and the plastic suffocates it. Both fish end up perishing in this situation. This is just an example of one interaction that our actions can have on this planet. There are individuals experiencing the flip side of the actions we do. Things are not simply out of sight, out of mind, as we generally internally would like to believe. Things removed from sight still go on to individuals that aren't us. They occur in this very universe, on this very planet we live on, at the exact same time that we are living, sharing the same space and resources. Just because we did not mean any harm by throwing the plastic bag away does not mean that discarding it will cause any less harm to the lives of those who inherit it. This is not to call into questions the morality of these actions, This is simply an observation of a truth that physically exists here and now. Our actions have reactions regardless if we choose to consider them or not. Practices that guarantee burden to the planet guarantee burden to the planet. When we discard plastic in the garbage, we have a tendency to completely forget about it. We are not to be blamed for this. Ultimately, given the societies we live in, we don't really have to think twice about the plastic we discard. While we should, we don't have to, and those who do not care are not forced to regard, or more importantly, those who do not care are not punished for their disregard. It goes out of sight and out of mind. In the current society and zeitgeist, it would be an abstraction to contemplate the unravelling path of an arbitrary piece of plastic, especially when we use so much of the substance. Who would think twice about this small candy wrapper that's in the garbage? There are thousands, millions of others. There's a plastic bottle right there, inside of a much larger plastic bag. Why should I care about this tiny plastic wrapper? Won't it take more energy to worry about this wrapper than not? Ultimately, for us individuals, yes, because of the current society we live in. Society as a whole is plastic crazy and uses it frivolously for almost everything. This makes sense for some things. Plastic is sterile, durable, easily manipulated, and extremely survivable to most conditions. Despite its practicality and short-term success, the long-term ramifications are where questions arise from. If we were to take account of every single piece of plastic we create, consume, and waste, while consuming at the rate we do, we would be very concerned, which we should be. But such consideration would be impractical to those who do not care about greater life more than they care about their own common luxuries and way of life. It wouldn't only be impractical, it would be unreasonable and counter-logical for said individual. Some people's habits are so deeply ingrained that they would view such changes as a crime against what they've come to know as their way of life. In all of the nightclubs and bars I've worked in, I've had to use single-use PET, or plastic one cups, to serve drinks on a daily basis. PET is the most commonly used and easily recyclable plastic. Despite PET being one of the easiest plastics to recycle, none of these establishments made any attempt to recycle a single cup. Selling hundreds to thousands of drinks a night while offering only garbage cans, these businesses did not give customers the chance to recycle or reuse such cups, meaning the customer's only option was to throw away the plasticware when finished with their 16-ounce drink. Thus, such plastic was destined to become litter somewhere. Although the plastic could have been recycled, it was not. No attempt was made to recycle it, and therefore it is as if the option of recycling had never existed, since the ramifications are the only outcome. When no attempts are made, the full damage is felt by those underfoot. When no attempts are made, we disregard the consequences which do not fall upon our shoulders. If the cup happens to land in the ocean and falls to the bottom, suffocating part of a reef, the physical ramifications are going to be felt regardless of if that cup could have been recycled. Unfortunately, in this event, the business that originally profited off the cup is facing a completely different direction, continuing such practices and making more and more money as a mountain of unseen plastic begins to accrue beneath their feet. These types of business practices guarantee that damage is done to the planet. Even if such a product isn't necessarily harmful, the system behind them partakes in practices which are harmful, thus causing the use of such a product to become harmful. Once a practice and product become harmful, it will obviously cause harm. It is not as if we are doing all of this evil on the planet, and the planet is not responding or reacting to the careless stomps we step. It is clear that the results of our actions are putting into play very serious ramifications. However, these ramifications don't appear from the universe with a name tag that says payback for the actions of humans. Since such ramifications are not blatantly labelled, we have to take it upon ourselves to look at the sources of such plights and connect the dots. When connecting these dots, one can see the direct causes in plain sight. Our fishing practices are the #1 cause of the loss of life within our oceans. Our factory farming agriculture practices are the #1 cause of the destruction of our Earth's land biomes, resulting in loss of species, trees and wildlife. Our factory farming practices are also some of the leading causes of harmful greenhouse gases like carbon and methane. Heart disease and cancer are the number one and number two causes of death in America, while processed meats are a Group 1 carcinogen, the highest tier of cancer-causing substances, a level shared with engine exhaust, gamma rays and asbestos. Furthermore, the link to processed meats and obesity is evident and abundant in today's society. Considering we consume such carcinogens multiple times a day, every day, for the source of our nourishment, it is not hard to see how such practices can be argued to be single-handedly the most devastating systems on this planet across multiple fronts. There is a reason for this, because you reap what you sow. You cannot facilitate such large systems of evil without experiencing any ramifications. This is why humans die eventually. We are not immortal. We must always face the consequences of our actions because we are not holier than any other creature on this planet. Besides total war, the foreseeable threats to our well-being are a result of forces that have been put into play because of a counterbalancing force that we asked for. We destroy the forests, tearing down trees to create land for many cows. The cows output greenhouse gases, gases which trees help to combat. This means we are trading trees, air cleaners, for cows, air polluters, which is clearly a detrimental trade outside of human-centric business values. This trade results in the physical landscape of the area changing in exchange for monetary gain elsewhere. Being as the communities hit by the repercussions are seldom the communities benefiting from the action. Because the physical structure of the area's air is changing, this results in changing weather. On a greater scale, this puts larger weather changes into motion, which then hit humans with the likes of hurricanes and heat waves, which then negatively affect many communities far away from the original source of the change. The changing of the planet is not the only ramification seen as a result of our actions. In large processed meat is the leading cause of death and suffering on this planet. When I say this, I'm referring to universal loss of life, not merely accounting for human deaths, though the link to human death is palpable. The system behind processed meat facilitates is responsible for the most widespread and consistent systematic killing of lives ever seen on this planet. Today's factory farming system kills 319 animals a second. Nothing that this planet has ever seen can come close to comparing to this amount of sustained, consistent killing. So what does the product of such a system lead to? Processed meats are directly linked to the top causes of death in America: heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Again, processed meats are a Group A carcinogen that most people consume every single day. Is it any coincidence that such diseases and cancers, which are caused by processed meats, are the leading killers in America? If every human smoked cigarettes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, would anybody be surprised if lung cancer was the leading killer of humans? Is it any coincidence that the system which demands the most killing of beings on this planet leads to the most death of beings on this planet? To give you an idea of the type of destruction we're causing on this planet, since 1970, 60% of the world's vertebrate animals have been wiped out. Wildlife populations in Central and South America have declined by 89%. Populations of freshwater ecosystems have collapsed by 83%, while the total population of the oceans have been halved. These are all a direct result of human actions. We are seeing a human-induced mass extinction. We are destroying our forests and oceans and have lost respect for the individual animals which we gather our meat from. Our soulless acts do not go unseen in the grand scheme of the universe, and the counterbalancing forces are evident, clear, and physically apparent. I've talked at length about human action on this earth. We do some pretty heinous things due to our own selfishness, and we disregard the experiencing individuals being crushed beneath our feet. This disregard leads to practices which obliterate instead of sustainably farming resources. What could possibly make things worse? More of us. Like a cancer, not only do humans carelessly torture and destroy almost everything they touch, but they also multiply rapidly. Like a virus, we take what is and turn it into more of ourselves. Think of a forest landscape turning into a metropolis city after some years. It makes sense that the primary objective and function of humans is to reproduce. However, this does not mean that this is necessarily the best thing for life on Earth. Not with the way we act right now. Not when our primary sources of nutrition stem from unsustainable practices. I'm not saying that humans are somehow counter nature. I'm saying the system we've set up is, in practice, anti-nature. I'm not saying that humans reproducing is a bad thing. It's the perpetuation of our race. It is a great thing. The problem is that so many humans are born into these systems, which are so devastating to our planet. Therefore, we are only adding to the force of the snowball rolling down the hill. Humans reproducing is not the problem. More humans supporting the systems which are destroying our planet is the problem. The massive spikes in the growth of human populations is a major contributing factor to the current state of the planet. 200 years ago, there were less than 1 billion people on this planet. Within the past 2 centuries, we have jumped to 7.8 billion people, and at the rate we're going, we could be looking at well over 10 billion by the year 2100. If we last that long, that is, which would be a feat in itself considering the rate we're going. As if to add insult to injury, while our standard practices for gathering are generally unsustainable and frequently cruel, we are constantly multiplying, which results in a greater demand for living essentials. As the snowball is already barreling down the hill out of our control, we add more and more snow to it. This is a very serious factor to be considered. Humans are not necessarily the problem. If there were many humans all conducting sustainable practices, this book likely wouldn't exist. But because the practices we do are unsustainable and we are ever increasing the demand, we only exaggerate and amplify the factors against us. Meaning the day of our imminent dead end, spelled out by our practices, will only arrive sooner and in greater force. I was once told that if you throw a carrot in the garbage and it is taken to a landfill, in 5 years you could find that carrot, cut into it, and it would likely still be orange on the inside. In disbelief, I did some research of my own and began a journey into the science of landfills, and learned that such a phenomena is a truth. This is no mistake. In fact, it's a result of the way landfills are designed to reduce and prevent biodegradation. They are designed this way because the amount of waste we create when it does biodegrade releases massive amounts of greenhouse gases. These gases can be and are extremely damaging. Biodegradation occurs when organic substances are broken down by living microorganisms, such as enzymes and microbes. These microorganisms require things like oxygen, nutrients, as well as proper temperatures and moisture to function and thrive. Landfills are large, compact piles of garbage, which doesn't necessarily make for good microbial living conditions. Because of this, organic matter doesn't biodegrade easily within these environments. However, despite the poor biodegradation conditions of landfills, the sheer scale of our waste output causes biodegradation to become a palpable factor, even when landfills are designed to minimize this factor. As mentioned earlier, according to the EPA, 15% of 2020 methane emissions were caused by MSW, municipal solid waste landfills. There's a conversation to be had about the double-sided nature of our food waste. On one side, the food we throw out contributes massively to the global problem of greenhouse gases, which furthers the contribution that our already harmful food practices have on the atmosphere. On the second side, much of the food waste is exactly that, wasted food. There are 2 significant facts shared by the World Food Programme that highlight this second point well. First, 1/3 of food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted globally. This amounts to about 1.3 billion tons per year. And second, all the food produced but never eaten would be sufficient to feed 2 billion people. That's more than twice the number of undernourished people across the globe. These statistics vaguely highlight the life-for-profit nature of our greater food systems. While easier said than done, if the food systems were built from the ground up with efforts of feeding the population and alleviating hunger, there would very likely be better allocation of resources and greater efforts to protect and distribute the food we harvest. It's not as if we don't have enough food to feed our populations. The problem lies in a misallocation of the food itself. It's not a food problem, it's a distribution problem. According to the same source from above, the World Food Programme, over 40% of the food wasted in developed countries comes from the retail and consumer levels. This means that products are wasted either when they're travelling to and sitting on shelves, or after they've been purchased already and are frivolously unused and discarded. Whether products are not purchased and make their way to the garbage, or because consumers' eyes are larger than their stomachs and they bite off more than they can chew, the wasted food makes its way to the garbage and goes unutilized and wasted. Being one of the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals, reducing food waste is a major problem on many fronts. Solving this problem can not only help feed the hungry of the world, but would also help to reduce the amount of perfectly good food that makes its way to the landfills while releasing dangerous gases into our atmosphere at the scale which it does. Since a large amount of our food supply is based around life-for-profit practices, the food that goes wasted likely came at the expense of an experiencing individual. A cow who's born into a life of agony and despair will die for nothing if their meat goes from processing plant to landfill without its nutrients being consumed. A pound of shrimp that goes wasted will not only mean the shrimp have died in vain, but also the 3 pounds of bycatch which were destroyed in an attempt to catch the shrimp will also have been destroyed in vain. As this wasted food makes its way to the landfill, where it then releases gases that begin to harm our environment, one might see the movement of balancing forces at work. Not only are we wasting the lives of the underfoot individuals we harvest, but our practices also cause fellow humans to go hungry, and in turn, these practices cause our environments to turn against us and become less habitable for the human race to survive. Most egregious of all, our widespread disregard for the planet and use of life-for-profit systems has led us to dig a mass grave for most of the beings on this planet, including ourselves. The Earth is currently undergoing a mass extinction. This is not the first mass extinction this planet has faced. However, it is the first one humankind will face, and more importantly, is the first mass extinction caused directly by humans. The human race has only been around for about 200,000 years, yet the current age we live in is called the Anthropocene, referring to the age where humans have begun to impact the planet severely. Since 1970, 67% of global vertebrate populations have been wiped out, while the human population has more than doubled. Wildlife populations in Central and South America have declined by 89%. Freshwater ecosystem populations have collapsed by 83%, while the population of the oceans have literally been halved. The rates at which we are consuming and the methods in which we act out are extremely debilitating to life on Earth. Whether it's animal agriculture, plastic waste, or simple novelty, humans decimate large amounts of natural life as if they and nature are infinite sources. They're not. They won't last forever when under attack. We can see the dead ends in the routes we take, we can foresee and then actively view the damage we do to the Earth. This planet has seen a handful of mass extinctions prior, therefore life will likely go on in any regard. Hopefully, as long as we don't wipe everything out with nuclear war or bury every sprout of life beneath a sheet of plastic. But in any event, this is irrelevant. We are discussing the fact that our actions are leading to dead ends. We are not concerning ourselves with what happens at the end of the road. Instead, we are worried about the road that we're on, as I, and hopefully many others, don't wish to be on a path towards a dead end. If that's the case, I would rather get out of the speeding car and walk in a different direction, even if at a slower rate. At least then we won't be accelerating towards a visible ending. Skew is a prominent factor in our lives. The skewing nature of our choices creates the fundamental timeline of our life. Our decisions determine our present, which directly leads to and influences the future. In fact, the future grows out of the seeds planted in the present moment. The present is where decisions are made, which means the present moment is the only way to influence one's life. The only time one can make any change is in the present. The tall tree did not appear instantly. It originated from a time long ago in the past, an event long in the past. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Chinese proverb. Humans have to do a better job at making sustainable decisions if we intend on sustaining ourselves on Earth, our only source of nutrition. These are decisions that consider the continuation of life on Earth. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it ultimately does have to be good enough to stop committing destruction at unsustainable rates. This is not a fairy tale, this is real life, meaning there are real incentives to change or else real consequences will be reaped. This means that we humans might need to do better than very barely trying. It means making genuine change in our actions. Humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and within the last 50, humans have halved the populations of the oceans. That is mind-blowing and concerning. We have to stop destroying. If we've destroyed half of the populations in the oceans between 1970 to 2020, then we will surely destroy the remaining half if we continue with the same practices that destroyed the first half. With growing populations, our only chance is to begin adopting sustainable practices and implementing them into our lives immediately. This won't be overnight, and will require upfront regard in order to identify where one can begin making positive changes and alternatives, but it will only get easier with time and by growing accustomed. We must act on an individual level, as this is the only level which we have a say in. Through actions on an individual level, genuine change will sprout and continue on. Through actions on an individual level, one's actions will inspire others to learn from and adopt similar practices. Our actions will forever ripple into directions of sustainability if that is the intention and execution which we bring upon this earth. One cannot make the masses change their actions while not changing our own first, which is why we cannot concern ourselves with what the masses are doing. We must act on our own accord to make the impact we desire. The key to slowing the fire is to stop ourselves from burning so hot. Once we cool down, we can help those around us to cool down as well. Finding alternatives and adopting new methods will allow one to pass such wisdom on to those around them. Living such a lifestyle will cause one to radiate to their peers and kin the potentiality of such lifestyle, giving them the option to adopt the same practices, thus creating another individual who acts positively, who will then create their own chain reaction of ripples. When enough individuals begin making sustainable ripples, the movement will grow larger and more powerful. En masse, these ripples will begin turning into waves, changing movements of people, affecting change on a larger scale, laws, social stigmas, societal norms, and so on. The biggest difference one can make is in their daily routine. One does not need to create documentaries or get legislation passed to make a difference. Genuine individual change overpowers the lost hope of large-scale mass change. Sure, some individuals may feel driven to set into motion things such as documentaries and legislation, but without said individuals first adopting a similarly attuned lifestyle, they will not be credible or tangible advocates of such movements. One cannot wait for mass bills to pass to begin their change. They must change on their own accord. Find alternatives, adapt and evolve around and with the current systems first. Given the current state of technology and information, this is not a difficult task. Then, once their efforts, money and energy are going into alternative means, both societal systems and norms will slowly shift to match the gradually changing new standards set by the individuals. Most people do not act out of malice in their daily lives, but the greater systems above them are damaging, and therefore, though the individual's goal is not to destroy, it is the result. In the end, all that's left to face are the results. One's intention to buy and reuse a plastic bag is not a bad thing. However, some years later, as it floats through the ocean and a fish is caught in it, it becomes a bad thing, causing the exchange to yield a net negative that leads to a dead, moneyless, lifeless end.